When a $120 million contract hangs by a thread and 20 elite engineers have failed, the last person anyone expects to save Harrison Robotics is the man emptying their trash cans. What happens when the invisible become indispensable? When a single red marker stroke rewrites everything the experts thought they knew? Tonight, you'll discover how Ethan Cole went from midnight janitor to the man who changed a Fortune 500 company's destiny, and why CEO Vivian Hart bet her entire reputation on someone the world had written off. Stay until the end to see how this impossible night unfolds. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m., and the Harrison Robotics boardroom looked like a battlefield after surrender. Coffee cups formed rings of dried brown residue across the maple conference table. Crumpled papers overflowed from the recycling bin. The massive whiteboard covering the eastern wall was a chaos of equations, diagrams, and frustrated crossouts in 4 different colors of marker. The sharp chemical smell of dry erase ink hung in the air like the residue of failed ambition. 20 of the brightest minds in artificial intelligence and robotics had spent 14 hours in this room. 20 experts, each commanding 6-figure salaries, each with degrees from institutions that opened doors most people didn't even know existed. They'd been assembled specifically for this crisis, flown in from 3 different time zones, promised bonuses that could buy luxury cars, and they had absolutely nothing to show for it. Vivian Hart stood at the head of the table, her reflection sharp in the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city's glittering skyline. At 42, she'd built Harrison Robotics from a garage startup to a $100 million company through sheer force of will and an almost supernatural ability to see 3 moves ahead of her competition. Her tailored charcoal suit didn't have a single wrinkle despite the marathon day. Her dark hair was still perfectly pinned, but her eyes, those famously ice-blue eyes that had stared down venture capitalists and hostile board members without flinching, held something her senior team had learned to fear: cold, calculating fury. 5 minutes, she said quietly. The room went silent. Graham Pierce, her chief technology officer, stopped mid-sentence in his explanation about computational limitations. Jennifer Moss, the lead systems architect they'd poached from Google, set down her stylus. Even David Chen, the young hotshot from MIT who'd been talking nonstop for the past hour about theoretical solutions, finally shut his mouth. Vivian didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. You have 5 minutes to give me something that saves this contract. After that, I start making calls to the client, and we begin damage control for the biggest failure in this company's history. Vivian, be reasonable, Graham started. He was 51, had been with her since the early days, and sometimes forgot that history didn't grant him immunity. We've made real progress. The pathfinding algorithm alone. The pathfinding algorithm was supposed to be solved 3 months ago. Vivian cut him off. Tonight wasn't about progress. Tonight was about a solution. We have a demonstration scheduled for Thursday morning. 48 hours from now, we're supposed to show Quantum Dynamics a fleet coordination system that can manage 300 autonomous units simultaneously without errors. Right now, our system can't handle 50 without catastrophic failures. She pulled up a tablet and flicked the latest test results onto the massive screen behind her. Red error markers bloomed across the simulation like a rash. This is what we're showing them? This? Jennifer spoke carefully. The core architecture is sound. We just need more time to optimize. We don't have more time, Vivian said. Each word was precisely placed, like a scalpel making an incision. Quantum Dynamics gave us 6 months. We took their money, we promised them revolution, and in 48 hours we deliver or we're in breach. $120 million, Jennifer, plus penalties that could put us in legal hell for years. And worse than the money, far worse, is what this does to our reputation. We become the company that overpromised and underdelivered, the cautionary tale in every investor pitch meeting. The silence that followed was suffocating. Graham tried again, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. We knew this was aggressive, coordinating that many autonomous units in real time, accounting for dynamic obstacles, optimizing for efficiency and safety simultaneously. No one's ever done it at this scale. The computational overhead alone is exactly what we said we could handle, Vivian finished. I didn't build this company by making excuses, Graham. I built it by doing what other people said was impossible. David Chen, who'd been frantically scribbling notes, looked up with desperate enthusiasm. What if we partition the fleet into smaller clusters? Reduce the communication bandwidth by... We explored that in hour 6, Jennifer said wearily. It creates synchronization issues at the cluster boundaries. The units start making conflicting decisions. Then we need a hierarchical decision tree that increases latency to unacceptable levels, Graham interrupted. We've been over this. Vivian watched them spiral. These were brilliant people. On paper, this room contained enough genius to solve nearly any problem in their field. But brilliance without results was just expensive noise. Her phone buzzed. Marcus Webb, chairman of the board. She ignored it. He'd been calling every hour since 6 p.m., each call a little more anxious than the last. The board had approved this contract against significant internal resistance, betting on Vivian's track record. If she failed here, the vultures would circle. There were board members who'd been looking for an excuse to push her toward a more collaborative leadership style, which was corporate speak for stripping her of control. 4 minutes, she said. Rachel Kim, their newest senior engineer, spoke up. She'd been quiet most of the night, which Vivian had noted. Sometimes the quiet ones saw things others missed. The synchronization protocol might be fundamentally flawed. If we're trying to coordinate from a central controller, we're creating a bottleneck. What if each unit had more autonomous decision-making capability, but with... We tried distributed decision-making in Phase 2, Graham said dismissively. It's chaos. Units start optimizing for individual efficiency instead of fleet coordination. You get traffic jams, collision risks, complete breakdown of cooperative behavior. But what if we weighted the decision parameters differently, Rachel pressed. Not fully autonomous, but not purely centralized either. A hybrid approach where doesn't solve the fundamental problem, David jumped in. You still need real-time data synchronization across 300 units. The network latency alone makes true coordination impossible at that scale with current architecture. Vivian could see Rachel withdrawing, her moment of insight crushed under the weight of more senior voices. It was a pattern she'd seen too many times. Good ideas killed not because they were wrong, but because they came from the wrong person at the wrong moment. The whiteboard mocked them with its tangle of failed solutions. Someone, probably David, had written "impossible" in the corner, then crossed it out, then rewritten it in larger letters. The question mark felt like surrender. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Thomas Reeves from Quantum Dynamics. She definitely wasn't answering that. He was probably calling to check in on their progress, which really meant he was calling to confirm his suspicions that Harrison Robotics was about to embarrass themselves spectacularly. Vivian moved to the window, putting her back to the room. The city stretched out below, millions of lights representing millions of lives, each person solving their own problems, fighting their own battles. From up here on the 42nd floor, it all looked peaceful, orderly. No one could see the chaos up close. She caught her reflection in the glass. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. You want to play with the big boys, Viv? Then you better be tougher than them, smarter than them, and you better never ever show weakness. The moment they see you falter, they'll rip you apart. He'd been talking about venture capitalists at the time, trying to prepare his daughter for the brutal reality of tech startups. But the lesson applied to everything. Her board, her competitors, her own team, they were all watching for the moment she faltered. 3 minutes, she said to the glass. Behind her, she could hear the desperate energy ramping up. Voices talking over each other, markers squeaking against the whiteboard, keyboards clicking as someone tried to run another simulation that would somehow produce different results from the same broken architecture. Graham's voice rose above the others. We could request an extension. Tell them we need another month to... No. Vivian didn't turn around. We signed a contract. We meet our commitments or we fail honestly. We don't beg for extensions. Then we're looking at controlled failure, Graham said bluntly. We document what we learned, we negotiate penalties, and we move forward. It's not ideal, but it's survivable. Now Vivian did turn around. Survivable? Graham, I didn't build this company to survive. I built it to lead. And sometimes leadership means knowing when to cut your losses, he shot back. For the first time all night, real anger flickered across his face. We took a swing at something ambitious. It didn't work. That's not a character flaw, Vivian. That's just reality. Even you can't will the impossible into existence. The room went absolutely still. No one talked to Vivian Hart like that. Graham seemed to realize it a moment too late, his face tightening. Vivian studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she nodded slowly. You're right. I can't will the impossible into existence. She glanced at the clock. 2 minutes? Anyone else want to state the obvious? Jennifer tried to ease the tension. What we've learned tonight will inform our next project. The work isn't wasted, it's just not enough, Vivian finished. I know. I've been hearing that for 14 hours. She set her tablet down on the table with deliberate care. Here's what happens next. In 2 minutes, you're all going home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start preparing our presentation for Thursday. Not a demonstration of success, but a thorough explanation of why we failed and what we learned. Professional, detailed, honest. We owe them that much. She looked around the room at each face, exhausted, frustrated, defeated. This isn't on you. I pushed for this contract. I told the board we could deliver. I bet the company's reputation on my confidence. So the failure is mine. It was the kind of statement that should have felt magnanimous, but somehow it made everyone feel worse. Vivian taking responsibility didn't absolve them. It just highlighted how completely they'd let her down. 1 minute, she said quietly. Anyone have a miracle? The silence was answer enough. Rachel Kim looked like she wanted to say something, but Graham's earlier dismissal had clearly taken the fight out of her. David Chen was still scribbling notes, but his earlier enthusiasm had evaporated into mechanical busywork. Jennifer just looked defeated, staring at the error-filled simulation results like they were a terminal diagnosis. The clock hit midnight. All right, Vivian said, we're done. We're done. Everyone go home. We meet at 8 a.m. to start damage control planning. The team started gathering their things with the defeated energy of people who'd just watched their best efforts crumble. Laptops snapped shut. Papers were shuffled into bags. Half-empty coffee cups were abandoned where they sat. Graham lingered, clearly wanting to say something. Vivian saved him the trouble. Go home, Graham. We'll talk tomorrow. Vivian, I didn't mean... I know what you meant, and you weren't wrong. Go home. He left, followed by the others in a tired procession. Jennifer was last, pausing at the door. For what it's worth, I still believe in what we were trying to do here. So do I, Vivian said. That's what makes this harder. Then she was alone in the wreckage of the boardroom, surrounded by the evidence of failure. The whiteboard full of false starts. The table littered with the debris of desperation. The massive screen still showing their broken simulation. Red errors pulsing like warning lights. She should leave. Should go home. Pour something expensive and start mentally preparing for the humiliation of Thursday morning. Start thinking about how to control the narrative. Minimize the damage. Maybe even spin this into some kind of learning experience that wouldn't completely destroy investor confidence. But she couldn't quite make herself walk away yet. Instead, she moved to the whiteboard, studying the equations and diagrams with fresh eyes. Somewhere in this chaos was the kernel of the problem they'd missed. It had to be there. Teams this talented didn't fail completely unless they'd made a fundamental assumption that was wrong. She traced her finger along one of David's earlier diagrams, following the logic chain. The synchronization protocol fed into the coordination algorithm, which interfaced with the pathfinding system, which generated commands for the individual units. Each piece made sense in isolation. But together, her phone buzzed yet again. This time she looked. Marcus Webb had left a voicemail. She didn't need to listen to know what it said. The board wanted answers. They wanted a plan. They wanted her to fix this, or at least explain why it couldn't be fixed. Tomorrow. She'd deal with all of it tomorrow. Vivian was gathering her own things, finally ready to surrender the night, when she heard the soft sound of the door opening behind her. She turned, expecting to see Jennifer coming back for a forgotten laptop, or maybe Graham wanting to continue their argument. Instead, a man in a gray maintenance uniform pushed a cleaning cart into the room. The night janitor. She'd seen him before, though she'd never really looked at him. Just a background presence, one of the invisible people who kept the building running while everyone else was home. He was younger than she'd vaguely thought, Maybe early 30s, with dark hair that needed a trim and shoulders that suggested he'd been athletic once upon a time. Tired eyes. But not the glazed-over tired of someone who'd checked out. More like the tired of someone carrying weight. "Sorry," he said, his voice quiet. "Didn't know anyone was still here. I can come back?" "No, it's fine," Vivian said. "I'm leaving anyway. Place is all yours." She moved toward the door, already mentally drafting the email she'd need to send to the board, when she heard him speak again. "Rough night?" She paused, slightly surprised. The cleaning staff usually avoided conversation with executives. Safer to stay invisible. You could say that. He was already moving around the room with practiced efficiency, emptying trash bins, straightening chairs. "I've cleaned this room after all-day meetings before. Never seen the whiteboard this full." Despite herself, Vivian glanced back at it. "We were trying to solve something complicated." "Any luck?" "No." He nodded like that was answer enough, and went back to his work. Vivian should have left right then. Should have walked out and let this anonymous janitor clean up the literal and metaphorical mess her team had left behind. But something made her ask, "Does it ever bother you?" He looked up, genuinely confused. "Does what bother me?" "Being invisible, cleaning up other people's work while they solve the big problems." For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not anger, but maybe something deeper and more complicated. Then it was gone, replaced by a small, tired smile. "Everyone's solving something. My problems just aren't usually written on whiteboards." It was a more philosophical answer than she'd expected from someone emptying trash at midnight. Vivian found herself curious despite her exhaustion. "What kind of problems are you solving then?" He hesitated, like he was deciding whether this was real conversation or just executive small talk. "How to be in two places at once, mostly. How to give my daughter everything she needs when I'm here most nights and she's home asleep. How to make sure she knows she's worth more than our current circumstances suggest." The honest specificity of it caught Vivian off guard. "Single parent?" "Widower. 3 years now." "I'm sorry." He shrugged, not dismissively, but like he'd learned to carry it. "We manage. She's the smartest kid you've ever met. Knows it too, which is both wonderful and terrifying." Despite everything, the failed contract, the looming disaster, the weight of the entire company on her shoulders, Vivian smiled. "How old?" 6. Going on 26. He moved to the whiteboard, spray bottle in hand. "I'll need to erase this. That okay?" "Wait." Vivian said it before she knew why, then feeling foolish, I need a photo first, documentation." It was a lie. The simulation results were all saved digitally, but something made her want to preserve this moment, this evidence of their failure, before it was wiped away. The janitor stepped back while she took a few photos with her phone. As she did, she noticed him looking at the whiteboard with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not confusion exactly, more like, "This is robotics, right?" he asked quietly. "Fleet coordination for autonomous units. We're trying to manage 300 robots simultaneously in a warehouse environment." The explanation came automatically, the same elevator pitch she'd given investors 100 times. Real-time pathfinding, collision avoidance, efficiency optimization, all working together. He didn't respond immediately. His eyes were moving across the whiteboard, following the logic chains, the equations, the failed solutions. "And the problem is it doesn't work. System crashes under load, units make conflicting decisions, errors propagate faster than we can correct them. We've tried everything. Centralized control creates bottlenecks, distributed control creates chaos. Hybrid approaches introduce latency issues." She heard herself talking and wondered why she was explaining this to the janitor. Exhaustion making her chatty, probably, but he was still studying the board with that same intent focus. His eyes stopped on a section near the top, David Chen's synchronization protocol diagram. "This timing parameter," he said, pointing. "Why is it set to 50 milliseconds?" Vivian blinked. "Because that's the minimum safe interval for command updates. Any faster, and you risk overwhelming the processing capacity of the individual units." "But you're sending the same command to multiple units, right? Fleet-level instructions that get parsed locally?" "Yes." "Then why are you treating each unit update as a separate event?" "You're creating artificial bottlenecks in your own communication architecture." His finger traced a path through the diagram. If you batch the fleet-level commands and optimize the parsing algorithm on the unit side, you could reduce this to maybe 10 milliseconds, maybe less. That alone would free up enormous processing bandwidth. Vivian stared at him, then at the whiteboard, then back at him. Who are you? He seemed to realize what he'd just done. The focus in his eyes shifted to something more guarded. Nobody. Sorry, I shouldn't have. I need to finish cleaning. No. Vivian moved between him and the door, her exhaustion forgotten. That's not a nobody observation. That's not even a somebody observation. That's an expert observation. So I'll ask again. Who are you? His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he'd refuse to answer, just push past her and disappear back into whatever invisible life he'd been living. But then something in him seemed to crack, just slightly. My name is Ethan Cole. I used to be a graduate student in AI and robotics at Stanford. I left before I finished my dissertation. The name meant nothing to her, but Stanford's AI program meant everything. Why did you leave? Because my wife got sick. Because the medical bills piled up faster than my stipend could handle. Because she died anyway, and I had a 6-month-old daughter and no degree and no time to finish one. Each sentence came out flat, factual, like he'd explained this before and learned to remove the emotion. I needed a job that paid immediately and didn't require credentials I didn't have. So I clean buildings at night while my neighbor watches my daughter sleep. The pieces clicked together in Vivian's mind with devastating clarity. You didn't just observe a problem with that timing parameter. You actually understand the architecture. I understand a lot of things that don't matter anymore. Show me. It wasn't a request. Ms. Hart, that's how you knew my name. You've heard it on calls, seen it on documents while you empty trash cans. Vivian grabbed a red dry erase marker from the tray and held it out to him. Show me what we missed. I'm a janitor. Oh, right now, you're someone who might have just saved a $120 million contract. So either show me what you're thinking, or I'm going to stand here all night wondering if the answer to my company's biggest problem literally threw itself away in the trash. Ethan stared at the marker like it might bite him. Then, slowly, he took it. He turned to the whiteboard, studying it for a long moment. Then he started writing. Not frantically, like David had been doing earlier. Not with the aggressive confidence of someone trying to prove they were the smartest person in the room, but with the careful precision of someone who actually understood what they were looking at. Your core problem isn't the synchronization protocol, he said as he wrote. It's that you're thinking about 300 robots as 300 separate entities that need to be coordinated. But they're not separate. They're a system, a distributed intelligence with shared objectives. He drew a new diagram, cleaner than the chaos already on the board. Instead of a centralized controller sending individual commands, you create a hierarchical decision framework. Fleet-level objectives cascade down to cluster-level tactics, which inform unit-level actions. But the information flows both ways. Units feed real-time data back up the chain, allowing the system to adapt dynamically. We explored hierarchical control, Vivian said. The latency only exists if you're forcing every decision up and down the entire chain, Ethan interrupted. He was focused now, the guarded expression replaced by something that looked almost like hunger. You create decision thresholds. Routine operations happen at the unit level. They're already optimized for that. Complex coordinations happen at the cluster level. Fleet-level intervention only triggers for major changes or conflicts. He started modifying the equations, his red marker cutting through the black and blue and green chaos like a surgical incision, finding the exact right spot. Your timing parameter isn't the problem. Your information architecture is. You're treating communication as a bottleneck to be managed instead of as the fundamental fabric of the system. If you restructure the data flow here, and optimize the decision tree parsing here, Vivian watched the whiteboard transform, watched old assumptions get crossed out and replaced with elegant solutions, watched a problem that had consumed 14 hours and 20 brilliant minds get dissected by a man in a maintenance uniform who'd walked in to empty the trash. This is real, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. The math is sound. Whether it works in practice, Ethan stepped back, looking at his work with a critical eye. I'd need to see your actual code to be sure. System architecture always looks cleaner on a whiteboard than in implementation. Vivian was already pulling out her tablet. Her fingers flew across the screen, pulling up the core synchronization code. Show me. Ms. Hart, I can't just… Ethan. She used his first name deliberately, trying to pull him back from wherever he was retreating to. In about 6 hours, my team is going to arrive to begin planning how to explain our failure to a client who trusted us with $120 million. If there's even a chance that what you just showed me could work, I need to know. So please, show me. He took the tablet. His eyes scanned the code, and she watched his expression shift from cautious to focused to something that looked almost like pain. This is actually really good work. Whoever wrote this knows what they're doing. Graham Pierce, my CTO, 15 years of experience. Then he'll understand what I'm about to say. Ethan started highlighting sections of code, his fingers moving with practiced confidence. The logic is sound, but the execution is fighting against itself. You're doing error checking at every stage, which is normally good practice, but in a real-time system with this many concurrent operations, you're creating cascade failures. One error triggers a check, which delays processing, which creates more errors, which trigger more checks. He pulled up a side window and started typing. Not just modifications, actual new code written from scratch, flowing onto the screen like he'd had it memorized. If you shift the error handling to a parallel monitoring thread and let the main synchronization run without constant interruption, you eliminate the cascade effect. Errors still get caught and flagged, but they don't bring down the whole system while you're processing them. Vivian watched the code appear, and something cold settled in her stomach. This wasn't lucky guessing. This wasn't even just theoretical knowledge. You've done this before, built systems like this. My dissertation was on emergent coordination in multi-agent robotic systems. I got pretty far before… He trailed off, eyes still on the screen, before everything else happened. How far? I had a working prototype, 30 units, warehouse simulation, full autonomy. It was smaller scale than what you're attempting, but the principles worked. He finally looked up at her. Yes, it worked. The boardroom was absolutely silent except for the hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of traffic 42 floors below. Vivian stood there with her tablet in hand, staring at a man who'd been invisible to her 30 minutes ago and felt the entire night shift beneath her feet. How confident are you that these changes would solve our problem? Ethan chose his words carefully. Confident enough that if this were my company and my contract on the line, I'd want to test it immediately. But I've been wrong before. And I've been out of this field for 3 years, which might as well be 3 decades in tech time. But you were right just now, about the timing parameter, about the architecture, about the cascade failures in our error handling. Because I was looking at it fresh, without the assumptions your team has been building on for months. Sometimes the advantage of being an outsider is seeing what everyone else learned to ignore. Vivian made a decision. The kind of decision her board would call reckless, that Graham would call irresponsible, that every logical part of her brain was screaming against. I need you here tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., executive conference room. Ms. Hart, Vivian, and before you tell me all the reasons why that's impossible, let me be very clear about what I'm offering. I'm offering you a chance to prove whether these ideas actually work. I'm offering you a seat at the table with the same team that's been failing at this for months. And when they push back, I'm offering you my full backing to defend your approach. I'm a janitor, Ethan said again, but this time it sounded less like a fact and more like a question. Right now, you're the person who might have just saved my company. Tomorrow morning, if you show up, you're the person who gets to prove it. What happens after that? Vivian held his gaze. Let's solve one impossible problem at a time. He looked torn. Vivian could see the war happening behind his eyes, hope fighting with self-preservation, possibility wrestling with 3 years of learned invisibility. My daughter, he started, I'd need to arrange, bring her. We have a family lounge on 32, full kitchen, TV, toys, comfortable couches. Bring her, bring books, bring whatever she needs. My assistant will make sure she's taken care of. You don't even know if I'm right. No, Vivian agreed. But I know 20 experts were wrong, so I'm willing to bet on the one person who saw what they missed. She glanced at the clock. It's almost 1 a.m. You need to go home, get a few hours of sleep, and prepare to walk into a room full of people who are going to resent everything you represent. It won't be comfortable. Nothing about my life has been comfortable for 3 years, Ethan said quietly. Then this should feel familiar. Vivian allowed herself a small smile. 8 a.m., Ethan. Don't be late. She watched him hesitate one more moment, then nod. Once. Sharp, decisive. Then he was gathering his cleaning cart, and she was alone again in the boardroom. But this time, the whiteboard didn't look like evidence of failure. It looked like the beginning of something impossible. Vivian took a photo of Ethan's red marker additions, then another. Then she started typing an email to her team that would turn their world upside down. Tomorrow morning was going to be chaos. She couldn't wait. The email Vivian sent at 1:47 a.m. was brief, precise, and calculated to cause maximum disruption. Team meeting 8 a.m. sharp. Mandatory attendance. Potential breakthrough on the quantum dynamics project. Come prepared to test new approaches. No exceptions. VH. She knew exactly what it would do. Graham would call her immediately, which she'd ignore. Jennifer would respond with cautious optimism. David would show up early, desperate to redeem himself. Rachel would arrive quietly hopeful that maybe, just maybe, someone had finally listened. What none of them would expect was Ethan Cole. Vivian slept for 3 hours, showered, and was back at her desk by 6:30. The building was mostly empty at this hour, just the early risers and the people who'd never left. She used the quiet to run Ethan's modifications through her own analysis, checking the math, stress testing the logic, looking for the fatal flaw that would prove this was just exhaustion-induced wishful thinking. She couldn't find one. At 7:15, her phone rang. Graham, right on schedule. What breakthrough? No greeting, no preamble. Vivian, I was there until midnight. There was no breakthrough. There was surrender. New information came to light after you left. What new information? From who? You'll see at 8. She kept her voice deliberately neutral, giving him nothing to grab onto. This isn't a game. If you found something in the code that we missed, we need time to... We have time. 40 minutes. I suggest you use it to get coffee and clear your head. She heard his frustrated exhale across the line. You're in one of your moods. I'm in a solving problems mood, Graham. Try to match my energy. She hung up before he could respond, then immediately called her assistant. Sarah, I need you to set up the family lounge on 32. Full amenities. There'll be a 6-year-old girl arriving around 8, daughter of a consultant I've brought in. Make sure she has everything she needs. Breakfast, entertainment, comfort. Treat her like a VIP's kid. Of course. Name? Vivian realized she didn't know. I'll text you the details. She sent Ethan a message next. What's your daughter's name and what does she like for breakfast? The response came faster than she expected. Lily, she likes pancakes but will eat anything that isn't green. Thank you for this. I'm terrified, but we'll be there. Good. Terrified means you understand the stakes. See you soon. At 7:40, Vivian went down to the lobby herself. She wanted to see Ethan arrive, wanted to gauge his state of mind before throwing him into the arena. The overnight security guard gave her a curious look. The CEO rarely came down to the lobby, but said nothing. Ethan appeared at 7:50, coming through the revolving doors with the little girl's hand clasped firmly in his. Even from across the lobby, Vivian could see the effort he'd put into this morning. His clothes were clean but clearly not expensive, khakis and a button-down that looked like they'd been purchased years ago when he'd been a different person. His hair was neatly combed, he'd shaved, but it was his expression that caught her attention, fierce determination fighting with barely controlled panic. The girl, Lily, was a miniature storm of energy contained in a bright yellow dress. Her dark hair was pulled into pigtails that were already starting to escape, and she carried a backpack that looked almost as big as she was. She was talking rapidly, gesturing with her free hand, completely oblivious to her father's tension. Vivian crossed the lobby to meet them. Mr. Cole, right on time. Ethan's grip on Lily's hand tightened fractionally. Ms. Hart, this is my daughter, Lily. Lily looked up at Vivian with the fearless curiosity of a 6-year-old who hadn't yet learned to be intimidated by titles or authority. "Are you the boss lady my dad's scared of?" Despite everything, Vivian laughed. "I might be. Are you the smart kid your dad's so proud of?" "I'm the smartest kid in my whole class. My teacher says I ask too many questions, but that's because she doesn't know all the answers." Lily stated this with absolute confidence. "Why is the building so tall? Do you work on every floor? What happens if the elevator breaks?" "Lily," Ethan said quietly, "remember what we talked about." I know, inside voice and polite questions. But Lily's eyes were still bright with curiosity, taking in every detail of the marble lobby, the security desk, the elevators with their gleaming brass doors. Vivian crouched down to Lily's level. "I have a special place set up for you on the 32nd floor. It has a TV, games, and my assistant Sarah is going to make sure you get the best pancakes in the city. Sound good? Can I watch science shows?" "You can watch whatever you want." "Then it sounds perfect." Lily looked up at her father. "See, Dad? I told you it would be okay." Ethan's expression suggested he was far from convinced, but he nodded. "Be good for Ms. Sarah, okay? I'll check on you soon." The elevator ride to 32 was quiet. Lily hummed to herself, bouncing slightly on her toes. Ethan stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Vivian checked her phone, giving him space to manage his nerves. Sarah was waiting when the doors opened, and Vivian watched her assistant's professional smile transform into something genuine when she saw Lily. "You must be the VIP I've been hearing about. I'm Sarah, and I've got fresh pancakes waiting. You like chocolate chips?" "Does anyone not like chocolate chips?" Lily responded seriously, and Sarah laughed. Ethan knelt down, bringing himself eye level with his daughter. "I'll be upstairs in meetings, but I'll come check on you, okay? You have fun with Ms. Sarah." "I know, Dad." "You already told me 3 times in the car." But Lily hugged him anyway, fierce and quick. "Go solve your robot problems. I'll be fine." Vivian saw the flash of pain and love cross Ethan's face as he hugged her back. Then Lily was following Sarah toward the family lounge, already asking questions about how the coffee maker worked and whether the TV could play educational documentaries. "She's wonderful," Vivian said as they got back in the elevator, this time heading up to 42. "She's everything." Ethan's voice was rough. "If this goes badly today, if I've made a mistake bringing her here, exposing her to, it won't go badly." "You can't know that." "No," Vivian agreed, "but I can control how I respond to whatever happens. And I promise you, Ethan, whatever reception you get from my team, I will make it clear that you're here at my invitation and with my full support." The elevator chimed for the executive floor. The doors opened onto the familiar hallway, and Vivian could already hear voices from the conference room. The team was gathering, coffee in hand, speculation running wild. "Last chance to run," she told Ethan quietly. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and stepped out of the elevator. "Let's go save your contract." The conference room fell silent the moment Vivian walked in with Ethan behind her. 7 faces turned toward the door with expressions ranging from confusion to outright shock. Graham stood frozen with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Jennifer's eyes went wide. David Chen actually said, "What?" out loud before he could stop himself. Only Rachel Kim didn't look surprised. She looked curious. "Good morning," Vivian said calmly, moving to her usual position at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming in early. I know last night was difficult, but I asked you here because we have new avenues to explore." "Vivian," Graham said carefully. "Who is this?" "This is Ethan Cole. He's consulting with us on the quantum dynamics project." The silence that followed was deafening. Then David leaned over to Jennifer and stage whispered, "Isn't that the night janitor?" Ethan's expression didn't change, but Vivian saw his hands tighten at his sides. "Mr. Cole has a background in AI and multi-agent robotics," Vivian continued, as if David hadn't spoken. "He reviewed our architecture last night and identified several critical issues we've been overlooking." Graham set his coffee down with deliberate care. "The janitor reviewed our architecture." "The former Stanford AI graduate student reviewed our architecture," Vivian corrected, "and found solutions we've been missing for months." "This is insane!" Graham wasn't even trying to hide his anger now. We spent 14 hours yesterday with some of the best minds in the field, and now you're bringing in what exactly? Someone who empties our trash cans and claims to have robotics experience? I don't claim anything, Ethan said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken, and every eye in the room snapped to him. I have a master's degree in computer science from Stanford. I was 3 months from defending my dissertation in AI when I had to leave. That's not a claim. That's a fact. And you're working as a janitor because, David's tone was skeptical, bordering on hostile. Because my wife died, and I had a 6-month-old daughter and medical bills that would take me 10 years to pay off even if I got a high-paying job immediately, which I couldn't because I had no degree, no connections, and no time to finish my dissertation. Ethan's voice was steady, but Vivian heard the steel underneath. I took the first job that would hire me without credentials and let me work nights while my daughter slept. Any other questions about my employment history, or can we talk about the actual problem? The room went very quiet. Jennifer had the grace to look uncomfortable. David suddenly found his laptop screen fascinating. Only Graham held his ground. Even if everything you're saying is true, you've been out of the field for years. Technology moves fast. Whatever expertise you had is obsolete. Then it should be easy for you to prove my solutions wrong, Ethan replied. Put them on the board. Test them against your current architecture. If I'm obsolete, my ideas won't work. Vivian cut in before Graham could respond, which is exactly what we're going to do. Ethan, show them what you showed me. For a moment, she thought he might refuse. The weight of 7 skeptical experts was a lot to carry, especially for someone who'd spent 3 years being invisible. But then he moved to the whiteboard, the same whiteboard from last night, now cleaned, and picked up a marker. Your core problem isn't the synchronization protocol, he began, and started to draw. Vivian watched her team as Ethan laid out his analysis. Graham's expression was stony, arms crossed, determined to find fault. David was typing notes, but with an air of going through the motions. Jennifer was actually paying attention, her brow furrowed in concentration. And Rachel was leaning forward, her eyes tracking every line Ethan drew. You're treating 300 robots as 300 problems, Ethan continued, but they're not. They're one problem with 300 moving parts. If you restructure your information architecture to reflect that, he went through the same explanation he'd given Vivian, but this time with more detail, more technical depth. He wrote equations, drew diagrams, referenced specific algorithms by name. And despite their skepticism and resentment, the team started to engage. Wait, Jennifer said about 10 minutes in. Go back to the hierarchical decision framework. You said cluster-level tactics, but how are you defining the clusters? Static assignment or dynamic formation? Dynamic. Clusters form and dissolve based on current objectives and spatial proximity. You get efficiency without rigidity. That's going to create communication overhead at the cluster boundaries, Graham objected. Only if you're treating cluster membership as a discrete state, Ethan countered. If units can participate in multiple clusters with weighted membership values, you get smooth transitions instead of hard boundaries. The communication overhead actually decreases because you're not constantly reassigning exclusive membership. Rachel sat up straighter. That's actually brilliant. It's like gradient descent, but for organizational structure. Exactly. Ethan looked at her with something like gratitude, the first sign of alliance in a room full of hostility. The math works the same way. Graham wasn't convinced. Show me the code. Theory is easy. Implementation is where everything falls apart. Fair enough. Ethan turned to Vivian. Can I use one of the workstations? She gestured to an empty seat and Ethan sat down, pulling up the same code base he'd reviewed on her tablet last night. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the confident speed of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before, and Vivian saw several team members exchange glances. Whatever else Ethan might be, he clearly knew his way around code. Here's your current error handling structure, he said, highlighting a section. Every synchronization cycle, you're checking for errors across all units simultaneously. When you find one, you pause the affected subsystem to diagnose and correct. But in a system this large, you're essentially guaranteed to have errors every cycle, which means you're constantly pausing, which creates the cascade failures you've been seeing. David leaned in to look at the screen. So what's your solution? We can't just ignore errors. We don't. We handle them in parallel. Ethan opened a new file and started typing. Code appeared on the screen, clean and elegant. Main synchronization thread runs continuously. Secondary monitoring thread watches for errors and flags them. When an error is detected, it gets routed to a correction subprocess that operates independently. The main system keeps running unless an error reaches critical threshold. You'll miss edge cases, Graham said. Errors that slip through your monitoring and compound into system failures. Not if the monitoring is comprehensive enough. Ethan pulled up another section of code. You're currently doing reactive error checking, waiting for problems to appear, then responding. If we implement predictive monitoring that looks for error patterns before they manifest, we can catch the edge cases before they become critical. Jennifer was nodding slowly. That might work. Graham, remember the simulation from Thursday where we got that weird synchronization drift? This approach would have flagged it 3 cycles before it became critical. One success doesn't prove a framework, Graham said, but his tone had shifted slightly. Less outright hostility, more professional skepticism. Then let's test it. Ethan looked directly at Graham. Give me your worst-case scenario. The test that broke your system most catastrophically. Let me implement these changes and we'll run it again. The challenge hung in the air. Vivian stayed quiet, letting this play out. This was the moment. Either Ethan's ideas would hold up under pressure or they'd crumble, and she'd bet the company's credibility on someone who talked a better game than he could deliver. Graham's jaw worked for a moment. Then he said, "Fine. Jennifer, pull up the 300-unit warehouse scenario from last night. The one where we couldn't even get 50 units to coordinate without catastrophic failure." "Graham," Jennifer started, but he cut her off. "If Mr. Cole's solutions are so revolutionary, they should be able to handle our hardest test. Right, Ethan?" "Right," Ethan said quietly, and Vivian heard the nerves underneath. But he didn't back down. The next hour was intense, technical, and absolutely riveting. Ethan implemented his changes while the team watched, sometimes helping, sometimes challenging, always skeptical. He reconfigured the synchronization protocol, restructured the error handling architecture, implemented the hierarchical decision framework he'd outlined, and slowly, grudgingly, the team started to see the logic. "Okay, that's actually clever," David muttered at one point, watching Ethan optimize a particularly complex data structure. Rachel was more openly enthusiastic. "This weighted cluster membership approach, have you published on this? I'd love to see the formal analysis." "It was going to be part of my dissertation," Ethan said, not looking up from the code. "Never got that far." "That's a crime," Rachel said seriously. "This is genuinely innovative work." Even Jennifer was coming around. "I hate to admit it, but I think this might actually be better than our original architecture. The error handling alone is worth implementing regardless of whether the rest works." Only Graham remained stubbornly unconvinced. He'd found a position by the window, arms crossed, watching the proceedings with the expression of a man waiting for the inevitable failure. Vivian understood the impulse. He'd spent months building the system Ethan was now dismantling, and his ego was taking a beating. But she also needed him to get past it. "All right," Ethan said finally, pushing back from the computer. "It's implemented, ready to test." The room went quiet. This was the moment. Either the simulation would work and prove that a janitor had solved what 20 experts couldn't, or it would fail and prove Graham right. Jennifer pulled up the testing interface on the main screen. Same parameters as last night, 300 units, dynamic warehouse environment, full autonomy. Same parameters, Vivian confirmed. Running simulation now. The screen filled with data. 300 points of light representing the autonomous units, moving through a virtual warehouse, navigating obstacles, coordinating routes, optimizing efficiency. In last night's test, the system had collapsed within 90 seconds, errors cascading until the entire fleet was paralyzed. 30 seconds passed, no crashes. 60 seconds. The units moved smoothly, coordinating without conflict. 90 seconds. The point where last night's test had failed catastrophically. Still running clean, 2 minutes. The efficiency metrics were climbing, the error rate was near zero, and the coordination was flawless. Holy shit, David breathed. 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. The simulation just kept running, the virtual fleet operating exactly as it was supposed to, exactly as they'd promised quantum dynamics it would. Jennifer was staring at the screen like she was seeing a miracle. The coordination efficiency is at 93%. We've never gotten above 75. Error rate is 0.003%, Rachel added, her voice awed. That's not just good. That's better than theoretical optimal. How? David demanded, looking at Ethan. How did you see what we all missed? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He was watching the simulation with an expression Vivian couldn't quite read. Not triumph, but something sadder, like watching something he'd lost a long time ago. Because I wasn't trying to fix your solution, he said finally. I was trying to solve the problem. You all built on assumptions that made sense at the time, but locked you into an approach that couldn't scale. I didn't have those assumptions because I didn't build the original system. Sometimes being the outsider is an advantage. Graham finally moved from his position by the window. He came to stand beside the screen, watching the flawless simulation, his expression unreadable. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "This is solid work." It wasn't effusive praise, but coming from Graham, it was as close to an admission of defeat as Vivian was going to get. It's more than solid, Jennifer said. Ethan, this is the breakthrough we needed. If we can replicate this in the actual hardware implementation, we can, Rachel interrupted. The architecture translates directly. I can start on the hardware interface protocols right now. Wait, Graham's voice cut through the growing enthusiasm. Before we start celebrating, we need to talk about what happens next. Vivian, you brought in an outside consultant without any formal vetting, without checking his credentials, without any kind of security clearance. He's had access to our proprietary code, our development systems, everything. What's to stop him from walking out of here and selling our solution to a competitor? The room went cold again. Ethan's expression shuttered closed, and Vivian felt a flash of anger at Graham for poisoning this moment. What's to stop him, Vivian said carefully, is that he's not a consultant. As of this morning, he's a full employee of Harrison Robotics with a contract, an NDA, and a salary commensurate with his contribution to saving a $120 million contract. The silence was absolute. Ethan turned to stare at her, shock written across his face. You're offering me a job? I'm not offering. I'm telling you that you have a job if you want it. Senior Development Engineer, full benefits, competitive salary. You saved this contract. Now I want you here to make sure the implementation succeeds. Vivian, Graham started, but she held up a hand. We can discuss the details later. Right now, we have 48 hours to turn this simulation into a working demonstration. Ethan, I need to know. Are you in? He looked overwhelmed, torn between hope and disbelief. I'm a janitor. I don't have a degree. I've been out of the field for 3 years. You can't just... I can, and I am. The question is whether you're willing to take the risk. Vivian watched him struggle with it. 3 years of being invisible, being overlooked, being just the person who cleaned up other people's work. And now someone was asking him to step back into the light, to reclaim the expertise he'd buried to survive. My daughter, he said quietly. I need to be home at night. I need to be there when she wakes up in the morning. I can't sacrifice her stability for this job, no matter how much I want it. Then we make that work, Vivian said immediately. Flexible hours, remote work options when appropriate, whatever you need to be the father she needs while still being the engineer we need. I'm not asking you to choose between your daughter and your career, Ethan. I'm asking you to show me how to structure a company where people don't have to make that choice. Something in his expression cracked. For a moment, Vivian thought he might actually cry, but he held it together. Yes, he said. I'm in. The room erupted. Jennifer was already pulling up hardware specs, talking to Rachel about implementation timelines. David was recalculating their demo schedule, figuring out how much they could accomplish in 48 hours. Even Graham, still skeptical, was getting pulled into the momentum, his engineering instincts overriding his wounded ego. Vivian caught Ethan's eye across the chaos and nodded once. Welcome back. Then her phone rang. Marcus Webb. The board chairman had impeccable timing as always. I need to take this, she told the room. Keep working. Ethan, you're leading the implementation. Graham, Jennifer, Rachel, David, you report to him now. Any problems with that, you can explain to the board why you're unwilling to work with the person who just saved this company. She stepped into the hallway and answered the phone. Marcus. Vivian, I got your email from 2 a.m. saying you had a potential breakthrough. I need details. We're implementing now. Demo is still scheduled for Thursday morning. I'm confident we'll deliver. How confident? Enough to bet my position on it. She heard him exhale. What changed between midnight and now? I found someone who saw what we'd all been missing. Who? Someone who needed a second chance. I'll send you a full report after the demo. Trust me, Marcus. Another pause. Then, I do. But Vivian, if this falls apart, it won't. She hung up before he could ask more questions and went back into the conference room where her team was already deep in implementation, led by a former janitor who'd just been reminded of who he really was. The next 48 hours blurred together in a controlled chaos of code, coffee, and constant pressure. Ethan had expected resistance, had braced himself for pushback at every turn, but what he got instead was something he hadn't felt in 3 years: professional respect. Rachel Kim became his closest ally almost immediately. She understood his architecture intuitively, asked sharp questions that pushed his thinking forward, and didn't waste time on ego. By Tuesday afternoon, they'd restructured the entire communication protocol together, working side by side at adjacent workstations while the rest of the team handled hardware integration. This weighted clustering approach, Rachel said, pulling up a simulation on her screen. Have you thought about applying it to energy optimization? If units could dynamically adjust their cluster participation based on battery levels, we could extend operational time significantly. Ethan looked at her code, his mind already racing ahead. You'd need to weight energy state against positional efficiency. A unit that's low on battery but critical to current operation should stay active, while a fully charged unit in a redundant position could drop to standby. Exactly. Give me 20 minutes. She dove back into her work, and Ethan felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Collaboration. The kind of intellectual partnership he'd had at Stanford before everything fell apart. The kind he'd convinced himself he'd never have again. Jennifer handled the hardware interface, translating their elegant software solutions into commands that actual robots could execute. She worked with meticulous precision, testing every integration point, documenting every change. When she found issues, and she found several, she brought them to Ethan without defensiveness, just practical problem solving. The response latency on the cluster reformation is spiking when we hit unit counts above 220, she told him Tuesday evening, pulling up the test results. Software side looks clean, so I'm thinking it's a hardware buffer issue. Ethan studied the data, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The industrial controllers we're using have limited onboard memory. When cluster membership gets recalculated, we're overwhelming the buffer with update commands. So we need to batch the updates, but that increases latency. Unless we prioritize them. Ethan started sketching on the whiteboard that had become his constant companion. Critical updates go through immediately. Routine updates get batched and sent during low-traffic windows. We create a 2-tier system. Jennifer's eyes lit up. That could work. I'll start implementing now. Even David Chen, who'd been openly hostile that first morning, gradually thawed. He was brilliant with optimization algorithms, could squeeze performance out of code that seemed already maxed out. When Ethan hit a computational bottleneck on the predictive error monitoring, David appeared at his shoulder with a solution. Try this, he said, showing Ethan a completely refactored algorithm. Same functionality, 30% faster execution. Ethan reviewed it, impressed despite himself. This is really good work. David shrugged but looked pleased. Yeah, well, you fixed the foundation. Least I can do is help optimize the details. He paused, then added awkwardly, Sorry about that first morning. The janitor comment was out of line. It was accurate. Doesn't mean it wasn't shitty. David met his eyes. You're good at this, man. Really good. I'm glad Vivian brought you in. It was as close to an apology as Ethan was going to get, and he took it. Thanks. Your optimization skills are keeping us on schedule. Only Graham remained at a distance, professional but cool. He didn't obstruct Ethan's work, didn't undermine his decisions, but he didn't engage beyond what was strictly necessary. Ethan understood it. Graham had spent months building the system Ethan had torn apart in hours. That kind of blow to professional pride didn't heal quickly, but Graham was too good an engineer to let ego sabotage the project. When Ethan needed his expertise on the core synchronization timing, Graham delivered flawless work without complaint. When a critical integration issue threatened to derail their timeline Tuesday night, Graham stayed until 3 a.m., helping solve it, working alongside Ethan with grim determination. "This should stabilize it," Graham said finally, running the test for the 5th time. The simulation held. "We're good." "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. "I know this hasn't been easy." Graham was quiet for a long moment. "You're saving this contract. That's what matters." He stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, the work is solid. I still think Vivian took an insane risk bringing you in, but you've proven the risk was calculated. It wasn't warmth, but it was acknowledgement. Ethan would take it. Through it all, Vivian maintained a constant presence without hovering. She checked in regularly, cleared obstacles, ran interference with the board, and made it absolutely clear that Ethan had her full backing. When a senior VP questioned the wisdom of putting an unproven consultant in a lead role, Vivian shut it down with icy efficiency. "Ethan Cole isn't a consultant. He's a senior development engineer, and he's delivered more results in 2 days than we saw in 2 months. Any other concerns, Richard?" There weren't, but the pressure was relentless. They weren't just implementing Ethan's solutions, they were doing it on an impossible timeline. The demo was Thursday morning at 9. They had to have a working system, not a simulation, but actual hardware performing flawlessly in front of clients who'd invested $120 million based on promises Harrison Robotics had failed to deliver. Ethan felt the weight of it constantly. Every line of code he wrote carried the knowledge that failure meant more than just his job. It meant Vivian's credibility, the company's future, his team's trust. And underneath all of it, the terrifying possibility that he'd been wrong, that his solutions looked elegant on whiteboards and in simulations but would crumble when confronted with messy reality. He managed to get home each night to see Lily, though barely. She'd adapted to the chaos with the resilience of childhood, treating her days in the Harrison Robotics family lounge like an adventure. Sarah had become her favorite person, and Lily regaled Ethan with stories about the really cool science videos they'd watched and the super important business meetings she'd observed through the glass walls. "Dad, did you know some robots can learn from mistakes just like people?" she asked Tuesday night over hastily assembled sandwiches. Sarah showed me a documentary about it. "I did know that," Ethan said, trying to focus through his exhaustion. "In fact, that's kind of what I'm working on." "Are you building robots that learn?" "Something like that. I'm helping robots work together better." Lily considered this seriously. "Like teamwork?" "Exactly like teamwork. My teacher says teamwork is important because nobody's good at everything, but everybody's good at something." She took a huge bite of her sandwich. "Are you good at robot teamwork?" Ethan felt emotion catch in his throat. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." Wednesday morning brought a new crisis. The hardware units they'd been testing on were prototypes, close enough to the final specifications for development work but not identical. Jennifer discovered the discrepancy at 6 a.m. and immediately called an emergency meeting. "The production unit's quantum dynamics we'll be using have different processor configurations," she explained, her voice tight with stress. "Our code is optimized for the prototype specs. It'll run on the production units, but not efficiently enough to meet the performance targets." "How long to re-optimize?" Vivian asked. Jennifer and Graham exchanged glances. 10 hours minimum, maybe 15. "We have 12 hours until the demo." The room went silent. Ethan felt the familiar weight of impossible problems, the kind that had defined his life for the past 3 years. Never enough time, never enough resources, always trying to solve in hours what should take days. "What if we don't re-optimize everything?" Rachel said slowly. "What if we prioritize the critical paths and accept slightly degraded performance on secondary functions?" "The clients will notice," Graham said. "They're expecting optimal performance across the board." "Then we need optimal performance on what they'll actually test and acceptable performance on everything else, Ethan said, his mind racing. Jennifer, what are they most likely to focus on during the demo? She pulled up the demonstration plan. Coordination efficiency under high-density conditions, response time to dynamic obstacles, fleet-level pathfinding optimization. Those are our critical paths. Everything else is secondary. Ethan started writing on the whiteboard. We optimize these 3 functions for the production specs. Everything else we test to make sure it's functional, even if it's not perfect. That's a gamble, Graham said. If they drill into the secondary functions, then we're honest about the performance characteristics and explain the optimization priorities, Vivian cut in. But Ethan's right. We can't optimize everything in 12 hours, so we optimize what matters most. David was already pulling up code. I can handle the pathfinding optimization. Give me 4 hours. I'll take coordination efficiency, Rachel said. Jennifer and I will handle obstacle response, Graham said, and Ethan felt a flicker of surprise at the automatic partnership, the way Graham had just aligned himself with the team's decision without argument. What do you need from me? Ethan asked. Integration oversight, Vivian said. Make sure all the pieces fit together when they're done. And Ethan, she caught his eye. This is going to work. He wished he had her certainty. The next 8 hours were the most intense of Ethan's professional life. He moved between workstations, reviewing code, testing integrations, catching errors before they could propagate. His team worked with focused desperation, the kind of energy that came from knowing failure wasn't an option. Rachel finished her optimization at 2 p.m., ahead of schedule. David completed his at 3:30, with performance metrics that exceeded even Ethan's projections. Jennifer and Graham delivered at 4, their code elegant and efficient, the result of 2 senior engineers working in perfect synchronization. Integration testing, Ethan said, and they loaded everything onto the production hardware for the first time. The first test crashed spectacularly. The second hung at the initialization phase. The third made it 40 seconds before errors cascaded through the system. We're missing something, Jennifer said, frustration clear in her voice. Ethan stared at the error logs, forcing his exhausted brain to focus. The pattern was there. He could feel it, but the details were slipping through his mental fingers like water. The processor timing, he said suddenly. We optimized for the production specs, but we didn't account for the interaction between optimized and non-optimized functions. When the system switches from a critical path to a secondary function, there's a synchronization gap. Can we fix it? Vivian asked. She'd been watching from the back of the room, silent until now. We need to add buffer handling at the transition points. It'll cost us maybe 2% efficiency overall, but it should stabilize the system. Ethan was already coding as he spoke, his fingers flying across the keyboard. 20 minutes later, they ran the test again. This time, it worked. The production units moved through the test scenario with flawless coordination, navigating obstacles, optimizing routes, working together like a single distributed intelligence. The metrics were good, not perfect across the board, but exceptional where it mattered and acceptable everywhere else. That's what we're showing them tomorrow, Vivian said quietly. Well done, everyone. The team broke into exhausted celebration. David and Rachel high-fived. Jennifer hugged Graham, who looked surprised but pleased. Even Graham cracked a small smile. Ethan felt hands on his shoulders and turned to find Vivian behind him. You did it, she said. You actually did it. We did it, he corrected. I just showed them a different way to look at the problem. Don't diminish this. You saved this contract, Ethan. Own it. He wanted to feel the triumph, the vindication, the proof that he was more than just the janitor who'd spent 3 years being invisible. But all he could think about was tomorrow morning, when everything they'd built would be tested in front of clients who had every reason to be skeptical. We still have to deliver the demo, he said. We will. Vivian squeezed his shoulders once, then let go. Go home. See your daughter. Get some sleep. Tomorrow morning, you're going to show quantum dynamics why they were right to trust Harrison Robotics. Ethan left the building at 7 p.m., earlier than he had in days. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of gold and orange. He picked up Lily from Sarah, who reported that she'd been absolutely delightful and asked at least 200 questions about everything. In the car, Lily chattered about her day while Ethan drove on autopilot, his mind already running through tomorrow's demonstration sequence. Dad, you're not listening, Lily said, and he realized she was right. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Tell me again." I said, "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" He glanced at her in the rear-view mirror. "How did you know tomorrow was important?" "Ms. Sarah told me. She said you're doing something really important for your job and that I should be proud of you." Lily kicked her feet against her car seat. "Are you nervous?" Ethan thought about lying, giving her the confident parent reassurance she probably needed. But Lily was too smart for that, and he'd always tried to be honest with her. "Yeah, I'm nervous. This is a really big deal, and a lot of people are counting on me." "But you're good at your job, right?" "I think so. I hope so." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mom used to say being scared and being brave is kind of the same thing. You can't be brave if you're not scared first." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Lily rarely mentioned her mother. She'd been too young when Sophie died to have many clear memories. But sometimes something would trigger a fragment, usually delivered with the matter-of-fact clarity only children possessed. "Your mom was right," he managed. "She was smart like that." "Like me," Lily said confidently, and despite everything, Ethan smiled. That night, he read Lily 3 stories instead of the usual one, tucked her in with extra care, and stood in her doorway longer than necessary, watching her sleep. Tomorrow would determine whether this new life they were building was real or just a temporary dream before reality reasserted itself. He went to his own room and pulled up the demonstration plan on his laptop one more time. Reviewed the code, the test results, the performance metrics. Everything looked solid. Everything should work. But he'd learned the hard way that should wasn't the same as would. Thursday morning arrived with cruel speed. Ethan was at Harrison Robotics by 7, earlier than necessary, but he couldn't stay home. Lily was still asleep when he left, and his neighbor Mrs. Chen had agreed to handle the morning routine and get her to school. The demonstration was set up in the main engineering bay, a massive space usually reserved for hardware testing. 50 autonomous units had been arranged in a simulated warehouse environment with shelving units, obstacles, and dynamic pathways. It was a scaled-down version of the full 300-unit system, but it would demonstrate all the key capabilities. The team was already there, running final checks. Rachel was testing sensor calibration. David was reviewing the control algorithms one last time. Jennifer and Graham were coordinating hardware setup with their technicians. And Vivian was on the phone with Marcus Webb, her voice calm but firm. "I understand the board's concerns, but we're ready. The system is solid. Yes, I'm certain, because I have the best team in the industry, and they've delivered exactly what we promised." She hung up and caught Ethan's eye. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." "That's not the confidence I'm looking for." Ethan took a breath. "The system is ready. The team is ready. If there's a failure, it won't be because we didn't do everything possible." "Better?" Vivian checked her watch. "Clients arrive in 90 minutes. Final systems check at 8:30. Then we're committed." The next hour passed in a blur of last-minute adjustments and mounting tension. Every test they ran worked perfectly, which somehow made Ethan more nervous. In his experience, systems that tested perfectly had a way of finding unexpected failure modes when it mattered most. At 8:30, Graham called for the final systems check. All 50 units initialized without errors. The coordination protocols activated smoothly. The hierarchical decision framework distributed commands efficiently. Everything was green. "We're go," Graham announced, and Ethan heard something in his voice that hadn't been there before. Not quite warmth, but respect. Maybe even a hint of pride. At 8:45, the clients arrived. Thomas Reeves led the quantum dynamics delegation, a lean man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for finding flaws in anything. With him were 3 technical experts and 2 executives, all wearing expressions of polite skepticism. Vivian met them at the entrance with her characteristic poise. "Thomas, thank you for coming. I know the past few months have been challenging, but I'm confident you'll be impressed with what we're about to show you." "I hope so, Vivian," Reeves said coolly. "We've invested a great deal in this partnership. It would be disappointing to discover that confidence was misplaced." "It wasn't. This way, please." Vivian led them into the engineering bay, and Ethan saw Reeves's eyes go immediately to the demonstration setup. Professional assessment, looking for obvious flaws, ready to be unimpressed. "Before we begin," Vivian said, "I'd like to introduce the team that made this possible. Graham Pierce, our CTO, who built the foundation we're demonstrating today. Jennifer Moss, lead systems architect. Rachel Kim, David Chen, senior development engineers. She paused. And Ethan Cole, who joined us this week and provided the breakthrough insights that solved our coordination challenges. Reeves's gaze landed on Ethan, and he felt the weight of professional judgment. Mr. Cole, what's your background? AI and multi-agent robotics, primarily focused on emergent coordination in distributed systems. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Where did you study? Stanford. Also true as far as it went. Reeves nodded, seemingly satisfied, and Ethan felt a flash of guilt. These people deserved to know they were trusting their $120 million investment to someone who'd spent the last 3 years emptying trash cans. But Vivian had introduced him as a senior engineer, and challenging that now would destroy everything. Let's see what you've built, Reeves said. Jennifer stepped forward to explain the demonstration parameters. We've set up 50 autonomous units in a simulated warehouse environment. Your production deployment calls for 300 units, but these 50 will demonstrate all the key capabilities at scale. We'll show you real-time coordination, dynamic pathfinding, obstacle response, and efficiency optimization, all running simultaneously. One of the quantum technical experts, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, raised a hand. What's your error tolerance in this demonstration? Less than 0.1% across all operational parameters, Graham said. That seems optimistic given your previous test results. Previous architecture had fundamental flaws we've since corrected, Graham replied evenly. Current system is substantially more robust. Dr. Chen didn't look convinced, but she nodded. We'll see. Rachel initiated the demonstration sequence. The 50 units came online smoothly, their status indicators glowing green. The control interface showed the hierarchical decision framework activating, clusters forming dynamically based on spatial proximity and current objectives. Beginning coordination test, Jennifer announced. The units began moving through the warehouse environment, navigating around obstacles, optimizing their paths in real time. On the main display, Ethan could see the data flowing through his weighted clustering algorithm, units shifting their cluster participation based on changing conditions, the system adapting and evolving like a living organism. It was beautiful, and it was working. Reeves watched intently, his expression unreadable. Dr. Chen was taking notes, her fingers flying across her tablet. The other quantum representatives whispered among themselves. Dynamic obstacle introduction, Rachel said, and technicians began moving barriers into the unit's paths. The system responded instantly. Units recalculated routes, communicated new paths to their clusters, coordinated movements to avoid collisions. Not a single error, not even a hesitation. Efficiency optimization check, Jennifer called out. The units reorganized themselves into a more efficient formation, reducing total travel distance while maintaining coordination. The metrics on the display showed 94% efficiency, better than their best simulation results. Ethan felt his heart pounding. This was actually working. Against all odds, despite the impossible timeline, through sheer force of brilliant engineering and desperate determination, they'd built something that worked. Then, at the 8-minute mark, Dr. Chen spoke up. Can you handle a worst-case scenario, multiple simultaneous failures with dynamic complications? Vivian didn't hesitate. Of course, what did you have in mind? Disable 5 units randomly, introduce 3 new obstacles in high-traffic areas, and request a fleet-wide formation change, all at once. It was exactly the kind of stress test designed to break coordination systems. Multiple cascading failures, conflicting demands, chaos introduced deliberately to find the breaking point. Graham looked at Ethan. So did Jennifer and Rachel and David. The question was clear. Can the system handle this? Ethan thought about the error-handling architecture he'd designed, the predictive monitoring, the parallel processing that kept failures from cascading. He thought about the weighted clustering that allowed smooth adaptation to changing conditions. He thought about Lily, asleep when he left this morning, and how much he wanted to give her a life where her father wasn't just surviving, but succeeding. Do it, he said. Dr. Chen programmed the scenario into her tablet. Executing now. 5 units went dark simultaneously. 3 new obstacles materialized in the middle of active pathways, and the control system requested an immediate fleet-wide reorganization. For 2 seconds, the system hesitated. Ethan watched the error monitoring light up, flags appearing as the predictive algorithms detected the cascade of problems. His parallel processing architecture kicked in, routing the failures to correction subprocesses while the main coordination continued. The active units detected their disabled counterparts and rerouted around them. Clusters reformed dynamically, absorbing the gaps left by the failed units. The new obstacles were identified, mapped, and integrated into pathfinding calculations in real time. And through it all, the fleet reorganization proceeded smoothly, units shifting into their new formation without a single collision or conflict. 15 seconds after the crisis began, the system had stabilized. 45 units operating in perfect coordination, efficiency at 91% despite the failures, error rate still below 0.1%. The engineering bay was absolutely silent. Then Dr. Chen looked up from her tablet, and for the first time since arriving, she smiled. "That's impressive. Very impressive." She looked at Reeves. "Thomas, I think we need to see the full 300-unit implementation, but based on this demonstration, the core architecture is sound." Reeves was nodding slowly, his skepticism giving way to something that looked almost like respect. "I have to admit, Vivian, I came here expecting excuses. This is considerably better than excuses." "This is what we promised you 6 months ago," Vivian said. "We hit some obstacles getting here, but the team delivered." "Mr. Cole," Reeves said, turning to Ethan, "this breakthrough you provided, can you walk me through the key innovations?" And there it was, the moment where Ethan could either own his contribution or diminish it. The old Ethan, the invisible janitor, would have deflected, would have credited the team, would have made himself smaller, but he wasn't that person anymore. Or maybe he was finally being that person again. The core innovation was reconceptualizing the fleet as a unified distributed system rather than individual units requiring coordination, Ethan began, and launched into a technical explanation of the hierarchical decision framework, the weighted clustering, the parallel error handling. Reeves listened intently, asking sharp questions, pushing on details. His technical experts chimed in with their own questions, and Ethan answered each one with growing confidence. This was what he'd trained for, what he'd been good at before circumstances forced him into survival mode. This was who he actually was. 20 minutes later, Reeves extended his hand to Vivian. "Consider us satisfied. We'll proceed with the full-scale implementation. I assume your team can handle the scaling from 50 to 300 units?" "Absolutely," Vivian said, shaking his hand firmly. "Excellent. My legal team will be in touch about the next phase of the contract." Reeves turned to Ethan. "And Mr. Cole, if you ever get tired of working for Vivian, give me a call. We could use someone with your expertise." It was the highest compliment Ethan could imagine, being headhunted by the client in the middle of a demonstration. He saw Vivian's slight smile and knew she was thinking the same thing. "I appreciate that," Ethan said, "but I'm pretty happy where I am." After the quantum dynamics team left, the engineering bay erupted in celebration. Rachel hugged Ethan with genuine joy. David was already texting someone about their success. Jennifer was reviewing the performance data with the satisfied expression of an engineer who'd watched her work function flawlessly under pressure. Even Graham approached Ethan, his expression less guarded than it had been all week. "That was good work," Graham said simply. "Thank you. Your foundation made it possible." My foundation had critical flaws you fixed. Don't diminish what you contributed." Graham hesitated, then added, "Welcome to the team, for real this time." It wasn't quite a friendship, but it was acceptance. Ethan would take it. Vivian appeared at his elbow as the celebration continued around them. "My office. 5 minutes." She walked away before he could respond, and Ethan felt a flutter of anxiety. Had he missed something, done something wrong, overstepped? He found her 5 minutes later in her corner office, standing by the windows that overlooked the city. She turned when he entered, her expression unreadable. "Close the door." He did, his nervousness increasing. Then Vivian smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "That was extraordinary. You were extraordinary. The team did excellent work implementing your solutions. But Ethan, don't downplay what just happened. You walked into a room full of skeptical experts. and defended your innovations under hostile questioning. You didn't just survive it, you dominated it. I just answered their questions. You commanded respect from people who came here expecting failure. That's not just answering questions, that's leadership. Vivian moved to her desk and pulled up a document on her computer. Which brings me to why I wanted to talk privately. Your current offer is for Senior Development Engineer. After what I just watched, I'm revising it. She turned the screen toward him. The job title read Principal Engineer, Advanced Systems Architecture. The salary made his eyes widen. Vivian, that's way more than you're worth. Not according to the value you just delivered. Not according to what Reeves just said about headhunting you. She leaned against her desk. I don't pay people for credentials, Ethan. I pay them for results. And you've delivered results that saved this company's reputation and secured one of our biggest contracts. This salary reflects that contribution. Ethan stared at the number, trying to process it. It was more money than he'd ever imagined making. Enough to pay off Sophie's medical bills in a year. Enough to move out of their cramped apartment into something with a real yard for Lily. Enough to stop surviving and start actually living. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Then go home, hug your daughter, and take the rest of the day off. You've earned it. He looked up at her, this woman who'd bet her company's future on a janitor with a red marker. Why did you take the chance? That first night you had no reason to trust me. Vivian was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant. My father started this company in a garage with nothing but an idea and absolute determination. He taught me that talent shows up in unexpected places, and the biggest mistake leaders make is assuming credentials equal capability. She focused back on Ethan. You reminded me of that. When everyone else was explaining why something was impossible, you just quietly solved it. That's the kind of person I want building the future of this company. I won't let you down. I know you won't. She smiled again. Now get out of here. Go be with your daughter. Ethan left Harrison Robotics at noon on a Thursday, walking out into sunshine that felt different than it had just a week ago. The building looked the same, the city sounded the same, but everything had fundamentally changed. He picked up Lily from school early, signing her out with the surprised approval of her teacher. In the car, she immediately started asking questions. Why are you here? Is something wrong? Did you get fired? No, sweetheart. The opposite. I did really well at work today, and my boss said I should take the afternoon off. So we can do something fun? Exactly. Can we go to the science museum? Please, please, please. Ethan thought about his typical response to requests like this, calculating the cost, weighing it against their tight budget, usually saying no. But today, with the promise of a principal engineer salary and the memory of Thomas Reeves's handshake still fresh, he said something different. Yes, absolutely yes. Lily's squeal of delight was worth more than any salary. They spent the afternoon at the museum, Lily dragging him from exhibit to exhibit with boundless enthusiasm. She asked 100 questions about robotics and artificial intelligence and space exploration, and for the first time in 3 years, Ethan answered them without the constant background worry about money and time and survival. Dad, Lily said as they stood in front of a display about Mars rovers, is this what your robots do? Explore places? Not quite. My robots work together in groups to solve problems. Like a team. Exactly like a team. She considered this seriously, then asked, Is your team nice to you? The question caught him off guard. Yeah, they are. Why do you ask? Because you look happy. Like really happy. I haven't seen you look like this I don't remember when. Ethan knelt down to her level, right there in the middle of the museum. I am happy. You know why? Why? Because I get to do work I love with people who respect me, and I still get to come home every night to you. That's pretty much perfect. Lily hugged him suddenly, fiercely. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat on their small balcony and called his old advisor from Stanford, Dr. Patricia Wong answered on the third ring, her voice surprised and warm. Ethan Cole, it's been, 3 years? About that. How are you, Dr. Wong? I'm well. More importantly, how are you? Last I heard, you'd had to leave the program. I'm so sorry about your wife. Thank you. The pain was still there, would probably always be there, but it had dulled to something he could carry. I'm calling because I wanted to tell you something. I'm back in the field. Principal engineer at Harrison Robotics, working on multi-agent coordination systems. Ethan, that's wonderful. How did that happen? He told her the whole story, the overnight janitor position, the whiteboard, the red marker, the impossible 48 hours. Dr. Wong listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You know what I'm going to say, don't you? She finally asked. That I should finish my dissertation. That you should finish your dissertation. Ethan, the work you just described, that's doctoral level research, original contributions to the field. If you documented it properly, you could defend tomorrow. I have a 6-year-old daughter and a demanding job. And you had both of those things while somehow revolutionizing fleet coordination architecture in 2 days. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but it's possible. And more than that, it's deserved. You earned that degree 3 years ago. You just never got to claim it. Ethan thought about it. Thought about Dr. Ethan Cole instead of just Ethan the janitor or even Ethan the engineer. Thought about Lily's teacher's face when he showed up to parent conferences with a doctorate. Thought about proving to himself that the last 3 years hadn't erased who he'd worked so hard to become. I'll think about it, he said. Good. And Ethan, I'm proud of you. Not just for the technical work, but for surviving 3 impossible years and still finding your way back. That takes a different kind of strength. After they hung up, Ethan sat in the darkness and let himself feel it all. The exhaustion, the relief, the cautious hope that maybe, finally, life was turning a corner. He thought about Sophie, wondered what she'd think of this unlikely resurrection. She'd probably make some joke about him always having to do things the hard way. His phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. Board meeting tomorrow at 10. They want to meet the miracle worker. Prepare for questions. He smiled and typed back, I'll be there. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan Cole went to bed not as someone surviving, but as someone building something real. The board meeting Friday morning felt like walking into a different kind of arena. Ethan had faced skeptical engineers, demanding clients, and impossible deadlines, but a room full of executives who controlled the company's future was something else entirely. Vivian had briefed him the night before. Marcus Webb will lead the questions. He's fair but thorough. Linda Park will want to know about scalability and long-term implications. Richard Donovan is a skeptic by nature, so expect him to push hard on your credentials and methodology. Don't let him rattle you. Any advice on how to handle that? Be yourself. The person who walked into my boardroom at midnight with a red marker and fixed what 20 experts couldn't. That person doesn't need to apologize for anything. Now sitting in the executive conference room with its leather chairs and commanding view of the city, Ethan tried to channel that confidence. The board members filed in with the practiced ease of people accustomed to power. Marcus Webb was a silver-haired man in his 60s with kind eyes that missed nothing. Linda Park was sharp and precise, her questions already queued up on the tablet in front of her. Richard Donovan looked exactly like Vivian had described, skeptical, arms crossed, ready to find fault. Vivian stood at the head of the table, perfectly composed. Thank you all for making time on short notice. As you know, we successfully demonstrated the quantum dynamics fleet coordination system yesterday morning. The client has approved moving forward with full-scale implementation. I wanted you to meet the principal engineer responsible for the breakthrough that made that possible. She gestured to Ethan. This is Ethan Cole. Ethan, the board. Marcus spoke first, his voice warm. Mr. Cole, Vivian sent us your technical summary. Impressive work. Walk us through how you identified the core issues our development team had missed. Ethan had prepared for this, but actually delivering felt different. The team hadn't missed anything, exactly. They'd built a sophisticated system based on sound principles. The problem was they were solving for individual unit coordination when they needed to be solving for emergent system behavior. When I looked at their architecture without the assumptions that had shaped it, I could see they were fighting against their own framework. And your solution? Linda asked. Reconceptualize the fleet as a distributed intelligence with hierarchical decision-making. Fleet-level objectives cascade to cluster-level tactics, which inform unit-level actions. Information flows both ways, allowing dynamic adaptation. The key innovation was weighted cluster membership that eliminated the hard boundaries creating communication overhead. Richard leaned forward. That's a nice summary, Mr. Cole, but I'm more interested in your background. Vivian mentioned you recently joined the company. Where were you working before? The question hung in the air like a trap. Ethan could feel everyone's attention sharpen. This was the moment. He could obfuscate, could give the technically true but incomplete answer he'd given Thomas Reeves, or he could own the whole truth. He thought about Lily, about Sophie, about 3 years of being invisible. Then he thought about the person he'd reclaimed this week, the engineer who'd saved a $120 million contract. I was working night maintenance here at Harrison Robotics, Ethan said clearly. Before that, I was a graduate student in AI and robotics at Stanford, 3 months from defending my dissertation when my wife got sick. She died. I had a 6-month-old daughter, and I needed immediate income without credentials I hadn't finished earning. So I took a janitorial position that paid immediately and let me work nights while my daughter slept. The silence was absolute. Richard's eyebrows had risen nearly to his hairline. Linda was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Marcus looked thoughtful. So, to be clear, Richard said slowly, you're a janitor who claims to have graduate-level expertise but never finished your degree. I'm a principal engineer who has graduate-level expertise and never finished my degree, Ethan corrected. The work speaks for itself. Either my solutions function or they don't. Either I saved the quantum dynamics contract or I didn't. My job title 3 weeks ago doesn't change the technical reality of what I've delivered. It changes the risk profile, Richard shot back. How do we know you can replicate this success? Maybe you got lucky once. Maybe you saw something obvious that a tired team overlooked. That doesn't mean you have the sustained expertise to lead development on a project this critical. Before Ethan could respond, Graham Pierce's voice came from the doorway. Then maybe my assessment will carry weight. Everyone turned. Graham stood there with Jennifer, Rachel, and David behind him. Vivian looked surprised but not displeased. Graham, Marcus said, this is a closed board meeting. I know, but when I heard you were questioning Ethan's capabilities, I felt obligated to provide context. Graham moved into the room uninvited, his team following. I've been with this company for 15 years. I've worked with dozens of engineers, from fresh graduates to industry veterans. Ethan Cole is in the top 5% of technical talent I've ever encountered, and I say that as someone who spent the first 2 days resenting everything he represented. Richard frowned. 2 days ago, you were questioning his presence on the team. 2 days ago, I was protecting my ego because he'd torn apart architecture I'd spent months building. Then I watched him not just identify flaws, but provide elegant solutions. I watched him code with the kind of fluency that only comes from deep understanding. I watched him defend his innovations under hostile questioning from quantum dynamics technical experts. Graham met Richard's eyes. He didn't get lucky. He's genuinely brilliant. And if this board decides his previous job title matters more than his demonstrated capability, then this company doesn't deserve him. The room went very quiet. Vivian was smiling slightly, clearly enjoying Richard's discomfort. Jennifer stepped forward next. I'll add my assessment, she said. I've implemented Ethan's solutions at the hardware level. The architecture is sound, scalable, and shows sophisticated understanding of both theoretical principles and practical constraints. This isn't lucky guessing. This is expert-level work. Rachel jumped in. His weighted clustering algorithm alone is publishable research. I've seen senior researchers at top universities with less innovative approaches to multi-agent coordination. Even David, who'd been the most openly hostile that first morning, spoke up. Look, I don't care where someone worked before. I care whether they can solve problems. Ethan solved problems we'd been stuck on for months. That's the only credential that matters. Marcus was watching this unexpected show of support with interest. Linda had started taking notes. Richard looked less certain now, his skepticism encountering the united front of the entire technical team. This is all very touching, Richard said, but his tone had lost its edge. But what happens when we scale to 300 units? What happens when quantum dynamics wants additional features? Can Mr. Cole handle sustained development? Or was this a one-time insight? I can answer that, Ethan said quietly. And the honest answer is, I don't know yet. I've been in this role for less than a week. I haven't proven I can sustain excellence over months or years. But I can tell you that I understand these systems at a fundamental level, that I have ideas for improvements and optimizations that will carry us well beyond the current contract specifications, and that I'm prepared to prove my value through continued results, not credentials." He paused, then added, "I also understand if the board has concerns about risk. I'm an unconventional hire under unusual circumstances. But I'd ask you to give me the same thing Vivian gave me that first night, a chance to prove what I can do before you decide what I can't." Marcus smiled. "Well said." He looked around the table. "I move that we approve Vivian's hiring decision and her proposed salary for Mr. Cole's position as principal engineer. The demonstration results speak for themselves, and the team's confidence in his abilities addresses any concerns about sustained performance. All in favor?" Linda raised her hand immediately. 2 other board members followed. After a long moment, Richard raised his hand as well, though his expression remained skeptical. "Motion passes," Marcus said. "Mr. Cole, welcome to Harrison Robotics in an official capacity. Try not to make the rest of us look bad." The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, covering implementation timelines, budget allocations, and marketing strategy for leveraging the successful demonstration. But Ethan barely heard it. The team had defended him, had stood up to the board on his behalf. Graham Pierce, who'd been coldly professional just days ago, had walked into a board meeting uninvited to advocate for him. After the meeting ended and the board members filed out, Graham approached Ethan. "Thank you," Ethan said. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. You saved this contract and you did it with grace despite having every reason to be arrogant about it." Graham extended his hand. "I was wrong about you. I'm man enough to admit it." Ethan shook his hand, feeling something settle into place. "I couldn't have done any of it without the foundation you built. The architecture was sound. It just needed a different perspective." "Partnership, then, going forward." "I'd like that." The rest of the team gathered around, and for a moment they weren't a hierarchy of positions and titles, just a group of engineers who'd accomplished something difficult together. "Drinks tonight?" David suggested. "Celebrate not getting fired and actually succeeding?" Everyone looked at Ethan. He thought about Lily, about his usual need to rush home. But she was with Mrs. Chen until 6, and maybe it was okay to celebrate, just this once. "One drink," he agreed. "Then I need to get home to my daughter." That evening, in a bar 2 blocks from Harrison Robotics, the team swapped stories about the intense 48 hours. Rachel told everyone about the moment she'd realized Ethan's clustering algorithm was actually genius disguised as simplicity. David admitted he'd Googled how to work with people smarter than you after the first day. Jennifer revealed she'd almost called Vivian at 2 a.m. Tuesday night to say the timeline was impossible, then decided to trust the process one more day. "What about you?" Rachel asked Ethan. "What was your worst moment?" Ethan thought about it. "Wednesday afternoon, when we discovered the processor configuration mismatch. For about 10 minutes, I thought everything we'd built was going to fail because of a detail we couldn't control. I remember thinking, I brought my daughter into this building, let her see me trying to be someone other than just her dad who empties trash cans, and now I'm going to fail in front of everyone." "But you didn't," Jennifer said. "We didn't," Ethan corrected. "The solution came from all of us working together. I had the initial insight, but implementation required everyone's expertise." Graham raised his glass. "To teamwork, and to Ethan for reminding us that talent shows up in unexpected places." They drank to that, and Ethan felt the last of his imposter syndrome begin to dissolve. These people respected him, not despite his unconventional path, but because he'd proven himself through results. He made it home by 6:30 to find Lily doing homework at the kitchen table while Mrs. Chen prepared dinner. "Dad!" Lily jumped up and hugged him. "How was your important meeting?" "It went really well. The bosses are happy with my work." "Does that mean you get to keep your job?" "It means I definitely get to keep my job." Lily's face lit up. "Can we get pizza to celebrate?" Mrs. Chen laughed. "Already ahead of you. I ordered it 20 minutes ago." That night, after pizza and homework and stories, Ethan tucked Lily into bed and sat on the edge of her mattress for a moment. "Dad?" she said sleepily. "Are you happy now?" "Yeah, sweetheart, I really am." "Good," You deserve to be happy. The simple certainty in her voice broke something open in Ethan's chest. You know what makes me happiest? Being your dad. Even when I ask too many questions, especially when you ask too many questions, it means you're curious and smart, just like your mom was. Lily was quiet for a moment. I wish I remembered her more. I'll tell you stories, as many as you want, and I'll make sure you know that everything good about you, your curiosity, your kindness, your brilliant mind, that all came from her. And from you, Lily said firmly. Ms. Sarah says you must be a really good dad because I'm so confident and happy. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. I try my best. Your best is really good. Lily yawned. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Lily. More than anything in the world. The next morning was Saturday, the first weekend since the chaos began. Ethan woke to sunlight streaming through his window and Lily singing off-key in the kitchen. He found her making cereal for herself, milk sloshed on the counter, a proud expression on her face. I made breakfast, she announced. I can see that. Very impressive. Mrs. Chen says I'm old enough to help more, so I'm practicing. They spent the morning at the park, just the two of them, with no pressing deadlines or impossible problems to solve. Lily played on the swings while Ethan sat on a bench and let himself just exist in the moment. No 3-year survival mode, no constant anxiety about money and time. Just a father watching his daughter play, thinking about how far they'd come. His phone buzzed with an email from Dr. Wong. She'd sent him the requirements for completing his dissertation at Stanford, along with a note. Most of your coursework is still valid. You'd need to update your research, but the work you just did at Harrison Robotics would more than qualify. Think about it, Ethan. You're so close. He was thinking about it. Thinking about Dr. Ethan Cole, principal engineer. Thinking about showing Lily that you could fall down and still get back up, that circumstances could knock you off course but didn't have to define your destination. Monday morning brought new challenges. The quantum dynamics contract was saved, but now came the harder work of scaling the demonstration system to full production specifications. 300 units instead of 50, real-world warehouse conditions instead of controlled testing, and a client who would be watching every milestone. The team gathered for their first post-demonstration meeting, and the energy was different now. Less desperate, more confident. They'd proven they could deliver. Now they just had to do it again, bigger and better. Vivian opened the meeting with characteristic directness. Quantum Dynamics wants the full system operational in 6 weeks. That's aggressive but achievable if we stay focused. Ethan, you're leading the technical architecture. Graham, you're handling integration and testing. Jennifer, hardware implementation. Rachel and David, optimization and refinement. She looked around the table. We just saved this contract. Now we're going to prove we can execute at scale. Questions? Graham spoke up. 6 weeks is tight. What's our contingency if we hit unexpected issues? We solved them, Vivian said simply. Same way we solved the last round of unexpected issues. This team has proven it can handle pressure. I'm not concerned. The meeting continued with task assignments, timeline reviews, and technical discussions. Ethan found himself naturally falling into the leadership role Vivian had assigned him, coordinating efforts, making architectural decisions, drawing on each team member's strengths. It felt right. It felt like coming home to a life he'd almost forgotten he could have. After the meeting, Vivian pulled him aside. How are you holding up, honestly? I'm good, still adjusting to the pace, but good. The board was impressed Friday, even Richard, though he'd rather eat glass than admit it. She smiled. You've proven yourself, Ethan. Now comes the harder part. Sustaining that performance over time. Can you handle it? He thought about the question seriously. I don't know yet, but I'm willing to find out. That's all I ask, she paused. There's something else. The press is going to pick up the story. Harrison Robotics landing a major contract after a dramatic turnaround. They're going to want the human interest angle, the janitor who became the hero engineer. How do you feel about that? Ethan's stomach tightened. I'd rather not be a story. I understand, but it's going to come out regardless. Better to control the narrative than let reporters create their own version. Think about it. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan settled into a rhythm. Days were consumed by development work, coding, testing, coordinating with the team, solving problems as they emerged. The scale up to 300 units revealed challenges they hadn't anticipated in the smaller demonstration, but nothing that required fundamental architectural changes, just careful optimization and persistent debugging. Evenings belonged to Lily. Ethan made it home by 6 most nights, helped with homework, cooked dinner, read stories. He'd arranged his schedule around being present for her, and Harrison Robotics accommodated it without complaint. Vivian had meant what she said about not forcing people to choose between family and career. Weekends were split between family time and finishing his dissertation. Dr. Wong had connected him with a Stanford professor willing to work remotely, and Ethan found himself writing up the theoretical framework and practical implementation of his weighted clustering algorithm, documenting his innovations in fleet coordination architecture, building the academic foundation that would finally earn him his doctorate. It was exhausting but satisfying, proof that with the right support and determination, he could reclaim everything he'd lost. 3 weeks into the 6-week timeline, disaster struck. The test run of the full 300-unit system crashed spectacularly, errors cascading through the fleet in ways that shouldn't have been possible given their architecture. Ethan stared at the failure logs, his stomach sinking, searching for the cause. "It's the network latency," Jennifer said, pulling up diagnostics. "The warehouse facility Quantum is using has different network infrastructure than our testing environment. We're getting variable delays in the communication protocol that our system can't compensate for." Graham ran another test with the same results. "This is bad. We built the entire architecture assuming consistent network performance. If the real-world environment can't provide that, then we adapt the architecture," Ethan said, his mind already racing through solutions. "We make the system robust to variable latency instead of assuming ideal conditions." "In 3 weeks?" David looked skeptical. "Ethan, that's not a small modification. That's reworking core assumptions." "We've reworked core assumptions before," Rachel said quietly. "We can do it again." The team looked at Ethan, waiting for him to either confirm the impossible or admit defeat. He thought about that first night in the boardroom, when 20 experts had declared the problem unsolvable. He thought about the red marker in his hand and the decision to either stay invisible or step into the light. "We can do this," he said, "but I need everyone all in. No holding back, no protecting egos. We're going to have to move fast and trust each other completely." "We're in," Graham said immediately, and the others nodded agreement. What followed was another intense sprint, but different from the first. This time they weren't a group of strangers forced together by crisis. They were a team that had already proven it could accomplish the impossible. The work was hard, the hours were brutal, but there was no resentment, no territorial fighting, just engineers solving problems together. Ethan implemented adaptive buffering that could compensate for variable network delays. Rachel optimized the clustering algorithm to be more resilient to communication gaps. Jennifer redesigned the hardware interface to provide better real-time feedback. David and Graham stress-tested every change, finding edge cases and pushing the system to its limits. Vivian appeared regularly with coffee, food, and quiet encouragement. She didn't micromanage or demand updates. She just made it clear they had her complete support, and she trusted them to deliver. Lily adapted to her father's increased hours with remarkable grace, spending more time with Mrs. Chen, but never complaining. When Ethan apologized for being so busy, she just hugged him and said, "It's okay, Dad, you're building something important. I understand." The maturity in her voice reminded him so much of Sophie that it hurt. 5 days before the deadline, they ran the final test. 300 units, real warehouse environment, full operational specifications. The system initialized smoothly. The fleet coordination engaged without errors. Units navigated the complex environment with flawless efficiency. And it worked. Not just functionally, but brilliantly. The adaptive architecture handled network variability without degrading performance. The efficiency metrics exceeded the original demonstration. The error rate was effectively 0. The team watched in exhausted silence as the test completed successfully, then broke into spontaneous celebration. Rachel hugged Jennifer. David high-fived Graham. Ethan felt hands on his shoulders and turned to find Vivian smiling. "You did it again," she said quietly. "We did it again," he corrected. Take the compliment, Ethan. You led this team through another impossible challenge. Own it. The final demonstration for quantum dynamics was almost anticlimactic. After the chaos of the past 6 weeks, showing them a flawlessly functioning system felt routine. Thomas Reeves walked through the warehouse facility, watching 300 autonomous units coordinate in real time, and simply nodded his satisfaction. "This is what we contracted for," he said. "Excellent work, Vivian. Your team has delivered exactly what you promised, despite some significant obstacles along the way." "Thank you, Thomas. We're proud of what we've built." Reeves turned to Ethan. "Mr. Cole, I meant what I said at the first demonstration. If you ever want to explore other opportunities, my door is open." "I appreciate that," Ethan said, "but I'm where I belong." After the quantum team left, Vivian gathered everyone in the conference room. "This has been an extraordinary 6 weeks. You've all gone above and beyond, and I want you to know that the board recognizes your contribution. There will be bonuses reflecting your effort, and I'm authorizing a week of paid vacation for the entire team, starting immediately." The announcement was met with surprised gratitude. A week off sounded like paradise after the intensity of the past month and a half. "One more thing," Vivian said, looking at Ethan. "The press wants the story. I've held them off as long as I can, but it's going to break soon regardless. How do you want to handle it?" Ethan had been thinking about this, about visibility versus invisibility, about who got to tell his story. "I'll do one interview," he decided. "Tell the whole truth. Janitorial work, Stanford, Sophie's death, Lily, all of it. But I want control over how it's framed, not as tragedy porn or inspiration poverty, but as proof that expertise doesn't expire just because circumstances change." "I can make that happen," Vivian said. "I know a reporter who'll treat the story with respect." That night, Ethan took Lily out for dinner at a nice restaurant, the kind they'd never been able to afford before. She ordered enthusiastically, asked the waiter thoughtful questions about how the kitchen worked, and told Ethan about her plans to be either a scientist or an astronaut, or possibly both. "You can be whatever you want," Ethan told her. "You're brilliant and curious and brave." "Oh, like you," Lily said seriously. "Mrs. Chen says you're brave because you didn't give up even when things were really hard." "Mrs. Chen talks too much," Ethan said, but he was smiling. "She's right, though. You could have stayed sad forever after Mom died. But you didn't. You took care of me and worked hard, and now you have a really important job." Lily took a bite of her pasta. "I'm proud of you, Dad." Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. Every single day." The interview ran the following week in a major tech publication. The reporter had kept her word, treating Ethan's story with nuance and respect. The article talked about his work at Stanford, Sophie's illness and death, the impossible choice between finishing his degree and providing for his daughter. It detailed his 3 years in janitorial work, the chance encounter in the boardroom, the red marker that changed everything. But it focused most heavily on the technical innovations he'd developed, the leadership he'd shown, the team that had rallied around him. It wasn't a pity story. It was a story about talent, resilience, and companies brave enough to recognize expertise regardless of where it appeared. The response was overwhelming. LinkedIn messages from recruiters, emails from former classmates and professors, interview requests from other publications, and unexpectedly, messages from other people who'd left academic programs due to circumstances beyond their control, thanking him for showing them that returning was possible. One message particularly stood out, from a woman who'd dropped out of medical school to care for her sick parent and had been working as a medical assistant ever since. "Your story reminded me that I'm still a scientist, even if I don't have the degree yet. Thank you for that." Ethan responded to as many as he could, offering encouragement, sharing resources, paying forward the second chance Vivian had given him. Dr. Wong called him the day after the article published. "You're famous now. How does it feel?" "Weird, good, but weird. I just wanted to solve a problem, not become a story." "Too late for that. But Ethan, the story matters. You're showing people that expertise doesn't have an expiration date, that circumstances don't define capability. That's important." She paused, then added, "Speaking of which, I have news. The department head reviewed your dissertation draft. He's impressed, very impressed. If you can defend in the next month, they'll approve it." Ethan felt his heart race. "Really?" Really? So finish it, Ethan. Claim what you earned. He did. Working early mornings and late evenings, between team meetings and Lily's bedtime stories, Ethan completed his dissertation on emergent coordination in multi-agent robotic systems. The weighted clustering algorithm that had saved the quantum dynamics contract became the centerpiece of his academic contribution, documented with the rigor and theoretical foundation that academia demanded. 4 weeks later, he defended remotely via video conference. His committee asked sharp questions, challenged his methodology, pushed on his conclusions. But the work was solid, built on 3 years of practical experience layered onto years of academic training. After 90 minutes, the committee asked him to leave the virtual room while they deliberated. Ethan sat in the Harrison Robotics conference room, Vivian beside him for moral support, and waited. When they called him back, Dr. Wong was smiling. "Congratulations, Dr. Cole, your defense was exceptional." The relief was so intense, Ethan actually laughed. Vivian hugged him, unexpected and warm. "You did it. You actually did it. I can't believe it's real." "Believe it. Dr. Ethan Cole, principal engineer. That's who you are now." That evening, Ethan picked up Lily from school, wearing the biggest smile she'd ever seen. "What happened?" she demanded immediately. "I finished something I started a long time ago. Remember how I told you I was almost a doctor, but for robots instead of people?" "Yeah?" "Well, now I actually am. Dr. Ethan Cole." Lily's eyes went wide. "You're a doctor now? Like a real doctor?" "A real doctor, just not the kind that fixes people." She threw her arms around him right there in the school hallway. "I knew you could do it. Wait until I tell my teacher." They celebrated with ice cream and a movie, just the two of them in their small apartment that suddenly didn't feel quite so small anymore. Later, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat on the balcony and called his parents for the first time in months. His mother cried when he told her about the doctorate, about the job, about how far they'd come. His father, typically reserved, just said, "I'm proud of you, son. Sophie would be proud too." The words settled into Ethan's chest like a blessing. 3 months after that first midnight encounter with a whiteboard, Ethan's life had completely transformed. He had a career that challenged and fulfilled him. He had a team that respected him. He had financial stability for the first time in years. He had his doctorate finally claimed. But more than any of that, he had proven to himself that the person he'd been before tragedy struck wasn't lost, just waiting, just needing the right moment and the right chance to emerge again. On a Friday evening, Vivian called him into her office. "Close the door," she said, and Ethan felt a flash of the old anxiety. "Everything okay?" "More than okay. I wanted to give you advance notice. The board is planning to announce a new VP of Advanced Development position. They've asked me to recommend someone." She smiled. "I'm recommending you." Ethan stared at her. "Vivian, I've been here 3 months. And in those 3 months, you've saved our most important contract, led development on our most advanced system, inspired your team to excellence, and proven you can handle pressure that would break most people. Time served is irrelevant. Results matter." "I don't know if I'm ready." "Neither did I when my father made me CEO at 32. But he told me something I'll tell you now. Readiness is a myth. You grow into responsibility by accepting it, not by waiting until you feel qualified." She leaned back in her chair. "Think about it over the weekend. But Ethan, you've earned this. Stop being surprised when people recognize your value." That weekend, Ethan took Lily hiking in the mountains outside the city. They climbed to a scenic overlook and sat together on a rock, looking out at the vast landscape stretching before them. "Dad," Lily said thoughtfully, "are you happy with how things turned out?" "With my job?" "With everything. After Mom died, you were sad for a long time. Are you not sad anymore?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "I'll always miss your mom. That kind of sad doesn't go away. But I'm also happy now in ways I didn't think I could be again. I have work I love, people who respect me, and most importantly, I have you. So yeah, sweetheart, I'm happy." "Good," Lily said with satisfaction. "You deserve to be happy, and I think Mom would be happy too, seeing you be a doctor and a boss and still the best dad ever." Ethan pulled her close, this brilliant, compassionate child who'd given him purpose through the darkest years. "You know what the best part is? What? I don't have to choose anymore. I get to be a good dad and a successful engineer. I get to have both. And that's because I found a place that values the whole person, not just credentials or titles. Is that why you want to stay at Harrison Robotics, even though that other guy offered you a job? How do you know about that? I pay attention, Lily said matter-of-factly. So is that why? That's why. Because Miss Vivian saw who I really was when I was invisible to everyone else. Because she gave me a chance when she had no reason to. And because the team I work with now feels like family. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. Ethan thought about the winding path that had brought him here. From Stanford graduate student to widowed father to overnight janitor to principal engineer to doctor to potentially vice president. None of it had been planned. All of it had been necessary. Dad? Lily said after a while. Yeah. When you tell people our story, tell them the whole thing. Not just the happy ending, but the hard parts too. Because I think people need to know that you can fall down really far and still get back up. Ethan looked at his 6-year-old daughter with wonder. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just haven't been paying attention. He laughed, the sound echoing across the mountains, and felt lighter than he had in years. The hard parts were important. The survival years mattered because they taught him resilience, humility, and gratitude for second chances. And now, on this mountain with his daughter, Dr. Ethan Cole looked toward a future that held possibilities he'd stopped letting himself imagine. Not because he'd earned them through suffering, but because he'd had the courage to pick up a red marker when everyone else had walked away. Monday morning, Ethan walked into Vivian's office with his decision already made. She looked up from her computer, reading his expression before he said a word. You're going to say yes, she said. I'm going to say yes, but I have conditions. Vivian's eyebrows rose slightly, but she looked pleased rather than offended. I'm listening. First, I need flexibility to continue being present for Lily. VP or not, I'm her father first. Second, I want authority to hire unconventionally. If we're going to build the best team, we need to look beyond traditional credentials. And third, I want to establish a mentorship program for people who've had to leave technical fields due to life circumstances. People like me who need a bridge back. Vivian was quiet for a moment, then smiled. The board is going to love 2 of those 3 conditions. The third one is going to make Richard Donovan's head explode, which makes me love it even more. Consider it done. Just like that? Ethan, you saved this company. You're asking for reasonable accommodations that will make us better and more humane. Why would I say no? She stood and extended her hand. Welcome to the executive team, Vice President Cole. He shook her hand, feeling the weight and privilege of the title. When do we announce? Board meeting is Wednesday. We'll make it official then. Until then, keep it quiet. I don't need the rumor mill working overtime. But apparently the rumor mill had excellent sources, because Graham appeared at Ethan's desk that afternoon with a knowing look. VP of Advanced Development, he said without preamble. Congratulations. How did you... Vivian's assistant ordered new business cards with your name and title. Sarah's terrible at keeping secrets. Graham sat down across from Ethan. For what it's worth, it's the right call. You've earned it. I've been here 3 months, Graham. You've been here 15 years. And in 3 months, you've accomplished what I couldn't in 15. That's not a criticism of me or a dismissal of my work. It's just reality. Graham met his eyes. I spent the first week resenting you for showing up my architecture. Then I spent a month watching you lead with brilliance and humility. Now I'm just grateful to work for someone who makes everyone around them better. The sincerity in his voice was unexpected and deeply moving. I'm not your boss, Graham. We're partners. You're about to be my boss, Graham corrected, and I'm good with it. Just promise me you won't forget what it was like to be overlooked. Use that perspective to build something better. That's exactly what I intend to do. The board meeting Wednesday went smoothly. Marcus Webb presented the recommendation, highlighting Ethan's technical contributions, leadership capabilities, and the team's confidence in his abilities. Linda Park asked thoughtful questions about his vision for the Advanced Development Division. Richard Donovan, predictably, questioned whether 3 months was enough time to judge sustained performance. We're not judging 3 months, Vivian countered. We're judging results. The quantum dynamics contract is worth $120 million. The technology Ethan developed has applications far beyond that single client. His weighted clustering algorithm alone could be licensed as a standalone product. We're not taking a risk on potential. We're rewarding proven value. The vote was unanimous, even Richard's hand eventually rising in grudging approval. Afterward, Marcus pulled Ethan aside. "You've had quite a journey, Dr. Cole. From maintenance staff to vice president in 3 months. That's got to feel surreal." "Every day," Ethan admitted. "I keep waiting to wake up." "Don't. This is real, and you've earned it. But let me give you some advice. Success can be just as disorienting as failure. Don't let the title change who you are. The person who picked up that red marker, that's who this company needs, not someone trying to perform the role of executive." "I'll remember that," Marcus smiled. "I think you will. Vivian has good instincts about people. She saw something in you that first night, and she was right to bet on it." The announcement went company-wide Thursday morning. Ethan's inbox immediately flooded with congratulatory messages. Rachel sent a gif of fireworks. David wrote, "About time. Now maybe you can get us better coffee in the break room." Jennifer's message was characteristically thoughtful. "You're going to be great at this. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." But it was the message from someone he didn't know that hit hardest. A woman named Patricia Liu, who worked in accounting, wrote, "I saw the article about your background. I left law school when my father got sick and never went back. Been feeling like a failure for 8 years. Your story reminded me that maybe I'm not. Thank you for that." Ethan responded immediately. "You're not a failure. You're someone who made an impossible choice with grace. If you ever want to talk about going back, I'm here." That evening, he picked up Lily from school with a small box in his passenger seat. She climbed in, already chattering about her day, and noticed it immediately. "What's that?" "Open it and see." Lily carefully opened the box to find a small nameplate. Dr. Ethan Cole, Vice President of Advanced Development, Harrison Robotics. She read it slowly, her lips moving over the words. Then she looked at him with shining eyes. "You got promoted?" "I got promoted. To Vice President? That's really important, right?" "It's pretty important." Lily threw her arms around him as much as the car seat would allow. "I'm so proud of you, Dad. Can I tell everyone at school?" "You can tell everyone everywhere." That night, Ethan called his parents again. His mother cried. She'd been doing that a lot lately, happy tears that made Ethan's chest feel tight with emotion. His father, in typical fashion, got practical. "What's the salary?" Ethan told him. His father was quiet for a long moment. "That's more than I made in my best year," he said finally. "Son, you've done well, really well. I had a lot of help and a lot of luck. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. You prepared yourself at Stanford, and Vivian gave you the opportunity, but the success, that's all you." After hanging up, Ethan sat with that for a while. The success was his, but it was also Vivian's for taking the risk, and the team's for supporting him, and Lily's for being patient with his long hours, and Sophie's for giving him a daughter worth fighting for. Success was never singular. It was a web of support and chance and determination all woven together. The following weeks brought new challenges and new rewards. Ethan hired his first unconventional candidate, a former aerospace engineer named Marcus, who'd been driving for a rideshare company after a layoff during the pandemic. Marcus had no recent experience in robotics, but his problem-solving approach was brilliant, and his hunger to return to technical work was palpable. "I won't let you down," Marcus said during his first day. "I know you won't, and if you struggle, we'll figure it out together. That's what teams do." The mentorship program launched a month later, with Ethan personally overseeing the selection process. They brought in 12 people who'd left technical fields due to circumstances beyond their control: illness, family obligations, economic pressures. Some had been gone for a year, others for a decade. But all of them had that same hunger Ethan recognized in himself, the desperate hope that maybe their expertise wasn't wasted, that maybe there was a way back. He met with each of them individually, sharing his own story, answering questions, offering encouragement, and he watched as they slowly shed the invisibility they'd learned to wear, the way he had, and started to reclaim their identities as engineers, scientists, developers. One participant, a woman named Jennifer, different from the Jennifer on his team, had left her PhD program in machine learning when her husband was deployed overseas and she was left alone with 3 young children. She'd been working retail for 6 years. "I don't even know if I remember how to code anymore," she confessed during their first meeting. "Your brain remembers more than you think," Ethan told her. "And what you've forgotten, you'll relearn faster than you learned it the first time. Trust the process." 3 months into the program, that same Jennifer presented a novel approach to predictive maintenance algorithms that Ethan immediately incorporated into their next client proposal. When he told her, she cried. "I thought that part of my life was over," she said. "I thought I'd missed my chance." "You didn't miss it. Life just made you take a detour. Welcome back." The quantum dynamics system went fully operational in early fall, performing exactly as promised. Thomas Reeves sent Vivian a glowing testimonial that the marketing team immediately plastered across the company website. More importantly, he brought Harrison Robotics 2 additional contracts, each building on the innovations Ethan's team had developed. Graham led the implementation on one, Rachel on the other. Ethan oversaw both from his new VP role, providing strategic guidance while trusting his team to execute. It was a difficult balance, letting go of the hands-on work he loved while embracing the broader responsibility of leadership. "You're doing it again," Vivian told him one afternoon, finding him hunched over code at his desk. "Doing what?" "Trying to do everyone's job instead of your own. You hired brilliant people. Trust them." "I do trust them. I just want to make sure that everything's perfect." "Ethan, perfection is the enemy of scale. Your job now is to set direction, remove obstacles, and develop people. Let them own the implementation." It was hard advice to follow, but Ethan knew she was right. He forced himself to step back, to review instead of rewrite, to question instead of solve. And he watched his team flourish with the autonomy, watched them develop solutions he wouldn't have thought of, watched them grow into their potential. It was deeply satisfying in a way the hands-on work had never been. 6 months into his VP role, Ethan got a call from Stanford. The university was hosting a symposium on unconventional paths in tech careers and wanted him to speak. His first instinct was to decline. Public speaking wasn't his strength, and the attention made him uncomfortable. But he thought about Patricia Liu in accounting, about Jennifer from the mentorship program, about all the messages he'd received from people who saw themselves in his story. He thought about what Lily had said on that mountain. Tell the whole story, because people need to know you can fall down and still get back up. He accepted. The night before the symposium, Ethan sat in his new apartment, a spacious 2-bedroom with a yard where Lily could play, and worked on his speech. Lily was at the kitchen table doing homework, her tongue sticking out in concentration the way it always did when she was focused. "Dad, how do you spell resilience?" He spelled it for her, then asked, "What's the assignment?" "We have to write about someone we admire and why." "I'm writing about you." Ethan felt emotion catch in his throat. "Why me?" "Because you never gave up, even when things were really hard. And because you show me that it's okay to fall down as long as you get back up." She looked at him seriously. "That's resilience, right?" "Yes, sweetheart, that's resilience." "That's what I thought." She went back to her writing, completely unaware that she'd just given her father the perfect opening for tomorrow's speech. The symposium was held in the same lecture hall where Ethan had attended seminars as a graduate student. Sitting backstage, waiting to be introduced, he felt the surreal circularity of it. The last time he'd been in this building, he'd been a desperate doctoral candidate trying to figure out how to finish his dissertation while his wife was dying. Now he was Dr. Ethan Cole, Vice President of Advanced Development at a company that was reshaping its industry. Dr. Wong introduced him with warmth and pride, recounting his academic achievements, his professional success, and the unconventional path between them. Then it was his turn. Ethan walked to the podium, looked out at the audience of students and faculty and industry professionals, and began. "My daughter is 6 years old, and last night she taught me what resilience means. She told me it's okay to fall down as long as you get back up. And I realized that's the only speech I need to give today." He told them the whole story, not the sanitized version or the inspirational highlight reel, but the truth. Sophie's illness and death, the impossible choice between his degree and his daughter's survival. 3 years of emptying trash cans while watching other people solve the problems he'd trained to solve. The shame of being invisible, the fear that he'd wasted his education, the constant anxiety about money and time, and whether Lily would grow up remembering only struggle. Then he told them about the whiteboard, about Vivian's willingness to see past his job title to his capabilities, about Graham's eventual respect, the team's support, the second chance that became a career resurrection. I'm not here to tell you that everything works out if you just try hard enough, Ethan said. That's not true. And it's insulting to everyone who's tried hard and still failed. Life is unfair. Circumstances are often beyond your control. Sometimes you do everything right and still lose. He paused, making eye contact with individuals in the audience. But I'm here to tell you that expertise doesn't expire. That if you developed real capability, it's still in you, even if you can't access it right now. That the time you spend in survival mode isn't wasted. It teaches you things that success never could. And that when opportunity does come, often from unexpected directions, you'll be ready for it in ways you didn't know you needed. The talk was supposed to be 30 minutes. Ethan spoke for 20, then opened for questions. The first came from a young woman in the third row. What would you say to someone who's currently in the position you were in, trying to survive, watching their expertise gather dust? I'd say you're not alone, first of all. And second, I'd say keep the pilot light on. You don't have to be actively working in your field, but stay connected however you can. Read papers, follow developments, maintain relationships. So when the chance comes, and it will come, though maybe not when or how you expect, you're ready to step back in. Another question. Do you regret the 3 years you spent in maintenance work? Ethan thought about it carefully. I regret the circumstances that forced me there. I regret that I had to choose between my education and my daughter's well-being, but the work itself? No. It taught me humility. It showed me what being invisible feels like, which makes me a better leader now. And it gave me time with Lily during years I'll never get back. So no, I don't regret it. I just wish it had been a choice rather than a necessity. The questions continued for 40 minutes, each one thoughtful and engaged. Afterward, a line formed of people wanting to talk one-on-one. Ethan stayed for 2 hours, listening to stories, offering encouragement, exchanging contact information with people who needed connection to someone who understood. One man, probably in his 50s, shook Ethan's hand with tears in his eyes. I was a software architect for 20 years. Then I had a stroke, and by the time I recovered, the industry had moved on. I've been working warehouse jobs for 3 years, convinced I was done. Your talk, it gave me hope that maybe I'm not. You're not, Ethan said firmly. Your brain relearned how to walk and talk after a stroke. It can relearn code. If you want help getting started, email me. I mean that. Dr. Wong found him afterward in the empty lecture hall. That was powerful, Ethan. Really powerful. I just told the truth. The truth is powerful, especially when it comes from someone who's lived it. She sat beside him. You know what I think? I think Sophie would be incredibly proud of who you've become. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. I hope so. I try to live in a way that would make her proud. That makes Lily proud. You're succeeding. Dr. Wong squeezed his shoulder. And Ethan, thank you for coming back, not just for yourself, but for everyone who needed to see that it's possible. The impact of that symposium rippled outward in ways Ethan couldn't have predicted. The video was posted online and went viral in tech circles. His inbox flooded with messages from around the world, people who'd left the field, people who were considering leaving, people who wanted to know if Harrison Robotics was hiring. Vivian called him into her office a week later. We need to talk about scaling your mentorship program. I'm getting calls from other companies wanting to know how we're doing it. And more importantly, I'm getting applications from incredibly talented people who heard about what we're building here. How many applications? 300 and counting, all from people with expertise in unconventional circumstances. She pulled up a spreadsheet. Former NASA engineer who's been working food service since his security clearance lapsed. PhD in computational biology, who left academia to care for aging parents. Senior developer who lost her job during the pandemic and couldn't get rehired because of the gap in her resume. Ethan, We're sitting on a talent pool that every other company is ignoring. We can't hire 300 people. No, but we can hire 20, maybe 30, and we can partner with other companies to place the rest. This could be bigger than just Harrison Robotics. This could change how the entire industry thinks about talent. It was an ambitious vision, but Vivian had never been one to think small. Over the next 6 months, they built it together. The Harrison Robotics Second Chance Initiative became a formal program, with partnerships across the tech industry, structured mentorship tracks, and a reputation for finding exceptional talent in overlooked places. Ethan interviewed every candidate personally, looking for that combination of technical capability and resilient determination that he recognized in himself. He hired a former aerospace engineer, a chemical researcher who'd left to raise her kids, a software architect recovering from addiction, a robotics specialist who'd spent 2 years homeless after a mental health crisis. Each of them brought unique perspectives shaped by their time outside the industry. Each of them was hungry, grateful, and determined to prove they deserved the chance, and each of them flourished with the right support. The program got written up in major publications. Other companies started similar initiatives. Ethan became an accidental spokesperson for second chance hiring, giving talks, consulting with HR departments, helping reshape industry norms around credentials and experience gaps. It was exhausting and exhilarating and deeply meaningful. Through it all, he made sure to keep his promise about being present for Lily. He coached her soccer team, even though he knew nothing about soccer. He attended every school performance, sitting in the front row with embarrassing enthusiasm. He helped with homework, read bedtime stories, and maintained the rituals that had sustained them through the survival years. One evening, almost exactly a year after that first midnight encounter with the whiteboard, Lily asked him a question that stopped him cold. "Dad, do you ever wish things had been different? Like that Mom hadn't gotten sick and you'd finished school when you were supposed to?" They were making dinner together, a weekly tradition they'd maintained. Ethan set down the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables and gave her his full attention. "That's a complicated question, sweetheart. Can I give you a complicated answer?" "Okay." "I wish every day that your mom was still here, that you got to grow up knowing her, that she got to see you become this amazing person. That loss, it doesn't go away, and I wouldn't want it to because she deserves to be missed." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But do I wish the last 4 years had been different? I don't know. If things had been different, I wouldn't have learned what I learned. I wouldn't have developed the perspective that makes me good at my job now. I wouldn't have the same relationship with you, because we wouldn't have been through hard things together. And I wouldn't be in a position to help people who are where I was." "So you're glad it happened?" Lily's brow furrowed, trying to work through the logic. "No, I'm not glad your mom died. I'm not glad we struggled. But I'm grateful for what those experiences taught me, and I'm proud of who we became because of them. Does that make sense?" Lily thought about it seriously. "I think so, like, you can be sad about the bad parts and still be happy about where you are now." "Exactly. Both things can be true at the same time." "That's weird, but okay." She went back to setting the table. "I'm glad you have your important job now, though, and I'm glad you still make time for me." "You're my most important job, Lily. Everything else is just what I do. You're who I am." The anniversary of Sophie's death came in early winter. Ethan and Lily visited her grave together, as they did every year, but this time felt different, less like drowning in grief, more like honoring memory. They brought flowers, told Sophie about their year, promised to make her proud. "Mom would be so impressed by your job," Lily said as they walked back to the car. "She'd be more impressed by you," Ethan replied. "You're brilliant and kind and brave. That's all her." "And you," Lily insisted. "Stop forgetting to take credit, Dad." He laughed, this wise child who somehow knew exactly what he needed to hear. That evening, Vivian called him. "I need you to come to the office tomorrow, early. There's something you need to see." "Can you give me a hint?" "No, just trust me." He arrived at 7 a.m. to find Vivian waiting in the lobby with a satisfied expression that made him nervous. She led him to the building's rooftop, a space he'd never been to before. The door opened onto a transformed landscape. What had been a plain concrete roof was now a beautiful garden terrace with seating areas, planters full of greenery, and stunning views of the city. and in the center, a bronze plaque mounted on a stone pedestal. Ethan walked closer, reading the inscription, "The Cole Terrace," dedicated to the principle that expertise appears in unexpected places, and great companies are built by leaders brave enough to recognize it, in honor of Dr. Ethan Cole, whose red marker changed everything. He stood there, staring at his name in bronze, completely unable to speak. "The board approved it unanimously," Vivian said quietly. "Even Richard voted yes, though I'm pretty sure it hurt him physically." "Vivian, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. You earned it, not just by saving the quantum dynamics contract, but by changing this company's culture. By showing us that talent doesn't require traditional paths, that second chances aren't charity, they're smart business. By building a program that's already changing lives." She paused, then added, "And selfishly, by reminding me why I started this company. My father built Harrison Robotics on the principle that innovation comes from seeing what others miss. You embodied that principle in ways I'd forgotten to look for." Ethan finally found his voice. "When I walked into that boardroom with a cleaning cart, I never imagined any of this." "I know. That's what makes it real." Vivian smiled. "Come on, there's one more thing." She led him back downstairs to the main engineering bay, where his entire team had gathered. Graham, Jennifer, Rachel, David, and the 15 other engineers who joined the Advanced Development Division over the past year. They broke into applause when Ethan entered, and he felt his face flush with embarrassment and pride. Graham stepped forward holding a small package. "We wanted to give you something. All of us contributed." Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was a red dry erase marker, mounted in a display case with an engraved plate. The marker that changed everything. "Thank you for showing us what's possible." He looked up at his team, his friends, and saw respect, affection, and genuine gratitude in their faces. "I don't know what to say except thank you, all of you, for taking a chance on someone who showed up in a maintenance uniform, for working ridiculous hours on an impossible timeline, for trusting me even when you had no reason to. This," he held up the mounted marker, "this isn't just mine. It's ours. We did this together." Rachel wiped her eyes. Jennifer was smiling broadly. Even Graham looked moved, though he was trying to hide it. "One more thing," David said. "We're taking you out tonight. No arguments. Sarah's already arranged care for Lily. It's time you celebrated yourself for once." That evening, in a restaurant too expensive for Ethan's still adjusting sensibilities, the team swapped stories and toasted their successes. They talked about the panic of that first demonstration, the exhaustion of the scaling sprint, the satisfaction of watching their system perform flawlessly in the real world. But more than that, they talked about what they were building next, the new contracts coming in, the innovations they were developing, the industry reputation Harrison Robotics was earning as the company that did impossible things with unconventional people. "To Ethan," Graham said, raising his glass, "for being brave enough to pick up a red marker when the rest of us had given up." "To the whole team," Ethan corrected, "for being brave enough to trust a janitor with your company's future." They drank to that, and Ethan felt a contentment he hadn't known was possible. This was success, not just professional achievement, but meaningful work with people who valued him, in a company that aligned with his principles. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago, emptying trash cans at midnight, invisible to everyone around him, convinced his expertise had expired, and his dreams were dead. That man would barely recognize the person he'd become. But in the ways that mattered most, he was still the same. Still Lily's father first. Still driven by the need to prove that circumstances don't define capability. Still grateful for second chances and determined to create them for others. He left the restaurant at 10, slightly tipsy and deeply happy, and called Mrs. Chen to check on Lily. "She's asleep," Mrs. Chen reported, "but she made me promise to tell you that she's proud of you, and you should have fun because you deserve it." "She really said that?" "Word for word. You've raised a special child, Ethan." "I know. I'm the luckiest dad alive." He went home to his sleeping daughter, kissed her forehead gently, and stood in her doorway watching her breathe the way he had so many nights during the hard years. But this time he wasn't watching with anxiety about the future. He was watching with gratitude for the present. In the morning, Lily woke him by jumping on his bed. Dad! Dad! Mrs. Chen showed me pictures of the rooftop garden with your name on it. Did she now? It's so cool. Can we go see it? Can I bring my friends? Can we have my birthday party there? Ethan laughed, pulling her into a hug. We'll see about the birthday party. But yes, we can go see it. Maybe this afternoon after your soccer game. Yes! Lily bounced excitedly. I'm going to tell everyone at school that my dad has a whole garden named after him because he's super important. I'm important because I'm your dad, Ethan corrected. The garden is just a nice bonus. You can be both, Lily said seriously. Important dad and important engineer. You don't have to pick. And there it was again. Wisdom from a 6-year-old that cut straight to the truth. He didn't have to pick. He could be both because he'd found a place that valued the whole person, not just the professional achievement. That afternoon, they went to the rooftop terrace together. Lily ran around exploring every corner, exclaiming over the plants and the view, and especially the plaque with her dad's name on it. This is the best thing ever, she declared, sitting on a bench next to Ethan. Well, maybe not the best. Having you as my dad is the best, but this is second best. I love you, Lily. I love you too, Dad. She swung her legs, too short to reach the ground. Are you happy now? Like really, truly happy? Ethan thought about the question. Thought about Sophie, who he'd love and miss forever. Thought about the survival years that had tested him in ways he'd never wanted to be tested. Thought about the red marker and the rooftop garden and the team that had become family and the program that was changing lives. Thought about this brilliant, compassionate daughter who gave his life meaning and purpose. Yeah, sweetheart, he said finally. I'm really, truly happy. Are you? I'm super happy because you smile now. You didn't smile much before, but now you do it all the time. That's because I have a lot to smile about. They sat together in the late afternoon sun, father and daughter, survivors and thrivers, on a rooftop garden that bore witness to the impossible journey from midnight janitor to vice president, from invisible to indispensable, from barely surviving to genuinely thriving. Below them, the city hummed with millions of stories, millions of struggles, millions of people fighting their own battles against circumstance and loss and doubt. Ethan thought about all of them, about the ones who would find their second chances and the ones who wouldn't, about the cosmic luck and individual determination required to transform crisis into opportunity. He thought about the message he'd received that morning from Patricia Liu in accounting. She'd enrolled in part-time law school, determined to finish what she'd started 8 years ago. Your program showed me it's possible, she'd written. Thank you for that. He thought about Marcus from rideshare driving, now leading a team developing next-generation pathfinding algorithms. About Jennifer from retail, whose predictive maintenance innovations were being implemented across 3 major clients. About the 50 other people whose lives had changed because Harrison Robotics had been willing to look past gaps in resumes to the capabilities underneath. But mostly, he thought about Lily. About giving her a life where she never doubted her worth, where she saw her father succeed not despite his unconventional path, but because of the perspective it gave him, where she learned early that falling down was just part of the journey, not the end of it. Dad? Lily said, interrupting his thoughts. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about red markers and second chances and how sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances. That's really philosophical for a Saturday afternoon. Ethan laughed. When did you learn the word philosophical? Miss Sarah taught me. She's very smart. Lily leaned against him. I'm glad the bad stuff happened because it led to the good stuff. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, sweetheart. Perfect sense. As the sun began to set over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Ethan Cole, former janitor, Stanford dropout, widowed father, doctor, vice president, second chance advocate, held his daughter close and felt the full weight of gratitude for a life reclaimed. The red marker sat in its display case in his office, a reminder that expertise never expires, that visibility is a choice, and that the bravest thing anyone can do is step forward when everyone expects you to stay invisible. He'd picked up that marker on a midnight cleaning shift, expecting nothing more than a moment's curiosity. Instead, he'd changed his life, his daughter's future, his company's culture, and, if the emails and messages were any indication, the lives of hundreds of people who needed to see that second chances were real. As they headed home that evening, Lily chattering about her plans for her birthday party on the rooftop, Ethan thought about Sophie, about the conversation they'd had when she was sick, when they'd known the end was coming. "Promise me you won't give up," she'd said. "Not on yourself, not on your dreams, not on showing Lily what resilience looks like." "I promise." He'd kept that promise. Through 3 years of invisible survival, through the terrifying moment of stepping back into the light, through every doubt and fear and moment of wanting to retreat to safety, he'd kept his promise, and in doing so, had discovered that the person he'd been before tragedy struck wasn't lost. Just waiting. Just needing the right moment, the right chance, the right red marker to emerge again. And now, walking hand in hand with his daughter toward a future bright with possibility, Dr. Ethan Cole smiled, knowing that some endings are really just beginnings in disguise.